Tobago Agricultural Society are as follows: Mr. Michael Neptune, President; Mr. Gladstone Solomon, Assistant Secretary; Mr. O.J. Alexander, Treasurer, Office Manager; and Mr. Junior Archer, Trustee. I would now like to invite these officials in our first group to introduce themselves. Starting with the Division of Food Production, Forestry and Fisheries.
Pleasant good morning, Mr. Chairman and your team. My name is Denise Williams. I'm the Acting Administrator for the Division of Food Production, Forestry and Fisheries. And with me, I have two officers, and they will introduce themselves.
Karen Shaw, Agro Investment Specialist with the division.
Good morning, Carl Murray, Technical Officer, Acting Department of Agriculture.
I would now introduce myself. My name is Stephen Crease, Chairman of this committee, and on my left.
Morning. My name is Wade Mark, member.
Good morning, all. My name is Glenda Jennings Smith. I'm a member.
Good morning, Nigel DeFreitas, member.
Good morning, Franklin Khan, member.
Good morning, Rushton Parry, Vice Chairman.
The objectives of this inquiry are as follows: to examine the state of the agricultural and fisheries industry in Tobago, to determine the level of participation in Tobago's agriculture and fisheries sectors, to understand the relationship between the THA, Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, Ministry of Trade and Industry, and other stakeholders in the agriculture sector, and to determine the major challenges affecting the agriculture and fisheries industries in Tobago. I wish to now acknowledge the receipt of the following written submissions, which came from the Division of Food Production, Forestry and Fisheries, the Tobago Agro Processors Association, the Tobago Agricultural Society, the Tobago Hotel and Tourism Association, the All Tobago Fisherfolk Association, the Agricultural Development Bank, and the Caribbean Agricultural Research and Development Institute, popularly known as CADI, in response to our committee's requests for written responses. I will now ask the Secretary, Division of Food Production, Forestry and Fisheries, if they care to make an opening statement. Any one of you are free to make an opening statement.
Let me say a pleasant good morning again and welcome to Tobago. With respect to the purpose of the inquiry and the committee's meeting this morning, we want to say that agriculture in Tobago and the revitalization of agriculture in Tobago has been a challenging task, and the Division of Agriculture, now the Division of Food Production, Forestry and Fisheries, have always been committed to the mandate of trying to boost agriculture production in Tobago as a means of diversifying the Tobago economy and as well positioning the Tobago economy in such a way that we can be self-sufficient, self-reliant, and as well ensuring that the people of Tobago are prepared and ready and able to consume safe and healthy food at all times. We have tried as much as possible to reach our mandates. We have been restricted at many times over the years by the lack of funding that enable a lot of the initiatives and projects to go forward in the way that we would have liked them to go forward. But nevertheless, we remain confident that we can make the impact that we need to make as a division in promoting the sustainable development of our agriculture in Tobago, and by this we mean not only agriculture but also the fisheries sector as well. We have had a good relationship with our stakeholders, we believe, and we continue to forge forward in support of the agriculture sector in Tobago. Thank you.
Okay, the floor is now open to questions from members of the committee.
Morning.
Senator Mark.
And allow me to also welcome the team from the Division of Food Production, Forestry, and Fisheries. Before I ask any questions, I want to, through the chairman, record my utter disappointment, because what I have before me is that this Joint Select Committee of the Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago invited the Secretary for the Division of Food Production, Forestry and Fishery, Assemblyman Hayden Spencer. Could anyone indicate to us why Mr. Spencer did not appear today? Or is that the letter you read, Mr. Chairman, that according to what legal counsel, they have declined? So Tobago has written to the Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. This is a supreme institution of lawmaking, and I've told the Parliament that some lawyer has instructed the Assemblyman not to come. That is amazing. I have many questions I would like to ask, and I don't know if the persons who are here are in a position to answer those questions. But I really want to record my utter disappointment. Could anybody here indicate why the Assemblyman is not here? Mr. Garth Otley?
Senator Mark, we need to proceed to the question.
Okay, well, I will. Mr. Chairman, based on what we have been advised so far, agriculture in Tobago has been in a state of decline. I have information before me that indicates that between 1982 and 2004, the number of agricultural holdings decreased from 1,966 to 947. And the acreage under cultivation also decreased from 5,872 hectares to some 2,038.5 hectares during the same period. I would like to ask anyone who can answer, what were the factors contributing to the decrease in agricultural holdings during this period that I have identified? And even as we go forward, what is responsible for that decline?
Good morning again. In many ways, the decline of agriculture in Tobago mirrors in many parts the decline that has been witnessed even in Trinidad and the nation as a whole over the last several decades. What has been successful for Trinidad is that with the decline and demise of plantation agriculture, domestic agriculture took over. And today, that is probably one of the greatest in terms of contributors to GDP where agriculture is concerned in the country, domestic production. In Tobago, domestic production did not survive. And largely in part, during that period in time, we had several factors taking place. One, the whole impact of the, as we call it, the Dutch disease effect was more pronounced in Tobago than in Trinidad. We had also the apprehension of persons to get into agriculture. We saw a cultural change. Parents were more likely to encourage their children into government-related services and jobs rather than into agriculture. Mainly, many of them coming themselves from that background and witnessing the hardships and the demise even in the aftermath of Hurricane Flora. We also had, and I think as a major contributor, the evolution and existence of these government social labor programs that took place and highly drained the agricultural sector both in Trinidad and in Tobago. With a smaller labor force in Tobago, obviously the effect would be more pronounced. And therefore we have, and even today, a problem with the availability of agricultural labor. With some of those factors and other factors plaguing, such as the increasing problems of pest and disease, many of the farmers as well who would have had holdings, their production practices were unsustainable. The slow rate of adoption of modern technologies to improve their production and productivity would have been impacted by their low adoption rates of some of these technologies. The transitioning as well into a modern type agriculture production system, year-round production, using irrigation systems, that the adoption rate was quite slow. So we had that, you know, a lot of individuals fell through because they were not really performing as they should and producing as they should. And the limiting cost of production factors would have forced many of them out of the sector. And in many ways, today it has been a challenge in attracting persons to get into agriculture. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that many persons find more suitable employment in the construction sector, the tourism sector, and by large, the Tobago House of Assembly.
Well, I'm glad you raised that because, tell me if I'm wrong, I have been advised that close to 80% of the labor force in Tobago are employed by the Tobago House of Assembly. Can you clarify for me?
I do not know if my other members have, but I do not have access to the specific data that suggests the percentage. But as well, we believe in our minds that the estimate is definitely above 60 to 65%.
Could I also ask, what percentage of the agricultural lands in Tobago are under private sector control, and what percentage is under the Tobago House of Assembly's control? And if you could probably indicate out of the percentage under the Tobago House of Assembly control, what percentage of that is actively engaged in food production in Tobago?
At the last estimate, the Tobago House of Assembly owned 37% of lands in Tobago, which remain therefore with the remaining 63% under private lands. As to the estimate in terms of a majority of that 37% of state lands in Tobago under the control of the Tobago House of Assembly lies under the Forest Reserve. And certainly the acreage is quite significant. Many of these lands, apart from the lands under Forest Reserve, were primarily of estate origin. Many estates were purchased by the Tobago House of Assembly, and some of them have been allocated for housing. Some have remained under agriculture. I cannot at this time give you an estimate as what percentage is under agriculture, but we know that there are significant parcels that have been allocated for agriculture.
Mr. Chairman, could the distinguished Mr. Garth Otley indicate how, or I should say, what is the process for applying and securing lands by the people of Tobago who are agriculturally inclined, how do they go about accessing agricultural lands for production purposes? The 37%, of course, a large percentage is under forestry, as you said. But how do they go about? What is the process? And could you tell us, for instance, over the last 4 years, how many citizens of, well, how many people in Tobago, farmers, have been able to access, through the Tobago House of Assembly, agricultural lands for productive purposes?
I don't know if you would like to permit me to answer for Mr. Gard Utley, but, but yes. The process of applying and gaining access to the use of state lands for agriculture purposes does not fall under the Division of Food Production, Forestry and Fisheries. It is under the office of the Chief Secretary. However, the process is quite a straightforward process. The management of state lands and the assessment and recommendations for the use of state lands for agricultural purposes is managed by the State Lands Management and Implementation Committee. And this is under the office of the Chief Secretary, as we said, which is also the Department of Land Management. An individual in Tobago who wishes to engage in agriculture production and is desirous of applying for state lands, there is an application process which they go to the Department of Land Management. There is an application form that they fill out with the necessary information, and that this is now submitted. As well, I think I'm advised that they are also requested to supply some form of business plan as to the type of entity or enterprise they wish to engage in. And it goes up to the committee for consideration. The committee at times may refer individuals, and if they engage in current practices, back to the Department of Agriculture for an assessment and recommendation from our extension officers. And these contributions are made, submitted back to the State Lands Committee, and then a final decision is taken in terms of whether individuals do qualify based on the enterprise that they are interested in, and as well the acreage that will be allotted to them, the areas that will be made available to them. And from there, necessary in terms of survey work and stuff will be conducted to ensure that individuals have in their mind what is their boundaries and stuff like that.
Mr. Chairman, one final question in this round. I think we'll want to invite the Chief Secretary, because if land is under his control and his office, and land management is under his control and office, we will want to get some clarification. And as I'm on that, do you have any information, because I've been getting information, that land distribution in Tobago that is under the THA control for agricultural purposes seem to have a political flavor in terms of distribution. In other words, the information I am getting, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you have to be a member of the PNM in order to get land under the control of the THA for farming purposes. Do you have any evidence of that? Do you have any information on that? Or do we have to summon the Chief Secretary to clear the air on land that is owned by the people of the Republic of TNT and ought to be distributed fairly and evenly to all, especially if they are farmers and they are genuinely committed to agricultural expansion, production, and development? You could clear the air for us on that?
I do, in terms of the politics behind it, as a technocrat, I cannot respond to that. But I can say fairly that I have sat before as a member of the State Lands Management and Implementation Committee as a representative from the Department of Agriculture. And in my mind, I believe my efforts and those of the colleagues at that time were in many ways fair and unbiased, and as well as the major determinant when it comes to my department. There is no bias in how we determine and make recommendations. In fact, I can tell you that no one rushes me to make a recommendation on behalf of anyone. I have made it clear many times. We have made recommendations, and regardless of the recommendations we make, we intend to carry out our duties and functions in a fair and unbiased manner. As to whether further determinations are made in that regard, I cannot say. But I do know when it comes to my department.
I'll bring to your attention at the appropriate time farmers in Tobago who have applied years and years, and they are very, very, very good at farming, and they are still awaiting land. And that is why I came to the conclusion that maybe there's a political flavor in the distribution of land. So that is not for you to answer.
I don't know, but if I could answer further, but even to clear the air, because farmers are the people who I interact with day to day, and to help them to understand as well, I do not dictate. I'm no longer a member of the committee, but I do not dictate in terms of the manner or the format in which individuals and the applications are brought before the committee when I was there. But we have to also understand that even though the Tobago owns 37% of the state lands in Tobago, a lot of the state lands in Tobago, and by far many of the state lands in Tobago are not very arable lands. Secondly, they are not located in the best and most suitable areas. So therefore, we have that most of the lands that are more amenable to agriculture, to agricultural production and productivity are on the southwestern side of the island, which are in the hands of large private owners. The areas that over the years of state lands and state land blocks that have been issued for agriculture have long become, many of them, saturated. Sometimes individuals who, I have dealt with applications recently, individuals who say that they have waited long and long for lands. Many of them, when they apply and when the assessments come to us, in many ways, the individuals, based on their business proposals, do not meet, in many instances, what we will determine to be suitable proposals for agriculture. It is one thing, and by far, I am not saying that this is a prejudice against Tobago farmers, but in many instances, there is a difference between minding 2 sheep and wanting to have state lands for sheep production. In many ways, there's a difference between a hobby and a part-time affair and wanting to engage in commercial agriculture production. As protectors of the interests of the state, we cannot, if I want to use the word willy-nilly, distribute lands because everyone say they want state lands. At the rate, in fact, when I was on the committee, one of the things I drew to the attention of the committee at my first sitting was that the rate at which we were going, there will be no lands left in Tobago because quite a bit of individuals were receiving state lands. So in terms of, for many farmers, I think in terms of, they need to review and try to understand in terms of, have that contact and communication with the Department of Land Management. Many of them have submitted applications and have never returned. You meet some of them, you ask them, well, they complain, they come to me sometimes. What is the issue? Well, we don't know. Well, you're not going to know if you don't find out and follow up and stuff like that. Tobago is small, it's just a walk down the road. So in many instances, I believe that people need to understand the process that takes place, but in respect to the impartiality and stuff like that, I believe that part is, as far as I am concerned and my involvement, it was upheld as much as possible.
Morning again, members of the panel. I've been listening to your responses to Senator Mark's questions, and I've heard what you've said in regards to the state of agriculture in Tobago and some of the issues that would have come up, things like land availability, diseases, and most importantly, the acceptance of technology. The question I want to ask is, based on the data that you would have been collecting in regards to the state of agriculture, do you have data such as the average age? You may not know specifically, but you must have a ballpark in terms of the average age of farmers in Tobago. Do you have that? What is the average age?
At the last census that was taken, the census revealed that even the difference between the census in 1980 and the census that was taken in 2004, there was very little difference in terms of the age group of farmers. By measure, most of the farmers in Tobago, a very large percentage of them, were over 45 years of age, with the average age of the farmer in Tobago being at 52 years of age.
And you're saying that that hasn't changed in 20 to 40 years? So that means, in order for that to be true, it means that 20 to 30 years ago, you would have had a lot of young people coming into farming because you would have had that succession going on. But to have an average age of 45 to 50 or above 50 still, it means that you're seeing where things like acceptance of technology becomes a problem. If you're in your 50s and farming, it means you've been farming for a while. It also means that you're not accepting of new technologies because you've been using particular methods to grow your crops. And the reason I'm raising this particular line of questioning is because it's important that we try to get more young people into agriculture, especially when we know that there are projects such as Sandals that are coming, where one of the benefits of such a project is the boost to agriculture. So we must in Tobago be prepared to prosper from that advantage. And if it is that you're telling me that the average age of farmers is in their 50s, and that they are not amenable to new technologies and whatnot, given the fact that you have issues such as labor, then we really need to come up with initiatives to get the young people in. Now, I made this statement in Trinidad when we had this inquiry with the ministry in Trinidad, that one of the things you need to do in terms of engaging young people in agriculture is show them where the money is. That's what they want to know. Because the stigma in agriculture is one of hard work, little money, and that's not necessarily the case. You can have a career in agriculture, a very good career in agriculture. And if we are not advertising agriculture from the level of the division in a way where young people can understand you can make a career, you can build a house, you can buy a car, you can send your children to school using agriculture, in other words, showing them where the money is, then you will not have that. You will have them going into construction, you will have them going into the House of Assembly to find work, because it's, in their opinion, it's more money for not as much hard work. So I'm just basically saying, I'm seeing here in your submission where some of the initiatives that have been taking place in trying to get people into agriculture is training and awareness programs and stuff like that. But are we doing anything such as getting certifications for farmers in Trinidad, in Tobago? So they get international certifications, which would mean their product is of a higher value, so that when projects like Sandals comes, you can actually get the best price to Sandals with that, because you're internationally certified. So it's not just about teaching them about new technologies, it's showing them where you can get these international certifications. Again, I'm not seeing here in the initiatives best management practices, things that you can do to, one, increase the quality of your product, and two, increase the profit of your farm. Is there any initiatives like that coming out?
First, let me address the issue where the question was raised as to the age of farmers, and perhaps that maybe there are a young cadre of farmers, so because of the gap that you were talking about, 20 years. What I've personally found in my experience is that many persons gravitate initially and quickly into the construction and tourism sector. When they believe that those areas have significantly declined, you now find people coming to me and people coming and saying, we want to get into agriculture. So by the time they're coming to you, they're no longer in their 20s and their 30s again. These are people, okay, I'm fed up working in the sector as a construction worker. I'm getting older and stuff. I can't manage to lift the bucket of mortar and the blocks and stuff again. So that you do have many folks, in terms of their level of participation and entry into the sector, sometimes comes at a much older age, in terms of not necessarily in their 20s and their 30s. However, I will not at the same time sit here and not admit that we have had quite a bit of interest by young persons. However, in many instances, when young persons come, one of the limiting factors, obviously, is the access to state lands, right? Access to lands. Let me say access to lands, because they don't have lands of their own. And what we have tried to do in agriculture in Tobago, we realize that if we are going to boost the competitiveness of agriculture in Tobago, it needs to be approached on several fronts. One, we need to, in terms of, establish our own uniqueness. And as part of that, in the strategic plan, and also embedded in the comprehensive economic development plan of the Tobago House of Assembly, is not only to brand Tobago as a destination for tourism, but to brand agriculture production in Tobago, to brand the produce of Tobago as one that is quite of a high quality, that is safe. Tobago has always maintained and have always been accepted as having produce that is of excellent quality. Many of the distinguished members here this morning will attest, may attest, to that once certain produce enters the Trinidad market and it says from Tobago, it's purchased in preference because There is a perception as well that Tobagonian farmers do not use the type of cocktails that are used in Trinidad production practices. So that we do have young persons. So we are looking at the whole branding of Tobago, and it's in line with your question in terms of our linkage with the tourism industry. Research has shown that more than 20% and a growing number of individuals who are going on vacation, their final determination of their destination country determines on whether the country is involved in environmentally sustainable practices in terms of whether they are doing a lot of things that are in harmony with the environment, whether the hotels they are going to represents that type of flavor as well. So we have that whole sort of green hotel type rating. And those are some of the linkages that we're trying to get into in terms of training farmers to meet that. So over the years, we have been engaged in training farmers in good agricultural practices. And we have been doing that for more than 10 to 12 years, in fact, probably more than that. Good manufacturing practices, post-harvest handling of produce. We have at one point in time for farmers who are interested in organic farming, we have had training that provided to them through the assistance of CADI. So we have been trying in many ways in terms of boosting Tobago's agricultural competitiveness through uniqueness, through branding. So therefore you're looking at that type of niche marketing, not only one that will ensure that by what we do that the people of Tobago are able to consume safe, produce that are safe and of a high quality, but as well one that will gain acceptance by visitors to our islands, whether it is Sandals or any other hotel. And I think we have been trying to embark as much as possible, as well trying to encourage young people, the young cadre, have a young cadre of farmers, by trying to promote and demonstrate and have involvement with young people in projects that use a lot of technology and innovations that shows them that agriculture is not as laborious and as demeaning as they think it is. Presently, we have embarked on a project. We are using young persons who graduated from the YAPA program, the Youth Apprenticeship Program in Agriculture, in a project right now in producing herbs and spices and on using protected agricultural systems, modern agricultural practices and techniques, micro-irrigation and stuff like that. So we are trying as much as possible to promote, but not only to promote, but to demonstrate and gain the involvement of youths and individuals in the concept of modern agriculture that will not only indicate and also demonstrate the quality of produce we are looking at, but also in terms of trying to foster a cadre of young entrepreneurs.
Well, thank you for that response, very comprehensive. Just two questions. I didn't hear anything, as much as you spoke about the good practices that have been given to farmers in terms of training. One of the things that usually come out of good practices is certification. Are we looking at either a local body for certification or bringing farmers up to standards by way of international certification, because it does add that extra level of quality to the products that are being produced? In other words, an outside body is saying, I have assessed your farm and I deem it to be of quality in terms of use of best management practices, and therefore I certify this, so that when they go to the end consumer, they can say, I have a green tick, it's environmentally sustainable, and we use the best management practices that we can, and therefore I'm certified, and this is my price of my product. That's the first question. The second question, as I understand the land availability issue, but one of the things that I am aware of is the limited land availability elsewhere in the world is no longer as a limiting factor in terms of agriculture, because there are technologies such as 3D farming, where you use a building to do your farming and each floor is growing a different product. Have we put forward that type of technology or thinking, given the fact that land availability is a problem in Tobago, as a way of working around that?
Yes, good morning. I will take the question on the quality aspect in terms of some of the initiatives that are being undertaken by the division. We commissioned a packing house in April of 2016 with an aim of assisting farmers in reaching the quality standards that are there locally, regionally, internationally. So out of that, we provide services to farmers in terms of handling, washing and sorting and grading even to the point that we allow them to have some ability to store their goods for a certain period of time because of the perishable nature of agricultural commodities. So that is one aspect in terms of where the division has tried to improve the quality of the produce that is being grown locally so that we are a bit more competitive on the marketplace, given that we do have challenges in volumes.
And that's commendable, but the actual certification of the farms is that extra step. We may not, I mean, if it is that we are not there at that point yet, then that's okay. But what I would like to hear is that that's what we're moving towards. So as much as we are engaging the farmers in terms of increasing their quality and engaging in these best management practices, it should be towards the end of being certified either by a local body that's set up to do so, or an international body, because that stamp, that tick, that certification adds a lot of value to your product. It says that this is a quality product based on the assessments that have been done. So as much as I'm hearing you saying that, yes, we have initiatives being put forward to ensure that it's a quality, without that certification, it's just that. It's just you're saying that this is a quality product. Somebody else has to assess this and say, yes, we have assessed it, we've looked at the practices, everything that you've done that you're saying now is in keeping with international or global standards, and therefore it is a quality product. Because what that will do is not only help you raise the price and value of your product, but it will allow you to export, therefore allowing the farmers to have a greater access to a market once that process by which they can export is set up. So that's why I'm asking specifically about certification, because that's a very, very, very important part of it. And then the second part I was asking, obviously, in relation to not just the certification, but the other question. I didn't get an answer to the other question.
Let me still take the first question. And we talk a lot about certification, but trying to understand as well how certification is being done. You may not tend to find, apart from the, and I stand to be corrected, apart from the organic producers, we have like IFOAM and several of these international agencies that can certify an organic farm elsewhere in the world. But in terms of, you would hardly find countries giving certification to other countries. What normally is obtains is that you are to meet the requirements that have been set by countries for entry into their markets. Once you can, in terms of meet those requirements, those trade protocols, then your produce will be accepted. And even, for example, when Trinidad and Tobago engaged Grenada and Barbados in export of local vegetable produce to those countries, the protocols that were set up established the fact that farms needed to be certified in terms of GAP certified, good agricultural practices, and we did engage in that, right? But the certification needs to come many times to ensure by the producing country that these standards have been met. And you will have persons from time to time come to inspect and ensure that these protocols are being met in terms of the quality of produce that is being expected. So in many instances, it's not being able to say, we're going to ask the EU to come and brand a stamp on our produce to say, okay, it is EU certified. In many instances, that is not the way. In many instances, you as the producing country, you are expected to meet the requirements, right? United States Department of Agriculture has its requirements for particular commodities, and you need to meet the requirements for that as set out, right? In terms of phytosanitary certification and stuff like that, that needs to be done and issued by the host country, the producing country, before you can proceed. So that in many instances, we try as much as possible to have persons follow certain international, for example, HACCP, which is something international. We ensure that people, we have persons who are trained in HACCP certification who work along with farmers to have their produce in terms of their facilities and stuff, HACCP branded. But again, as I said, it's incumbent upon the producing country to ensure that you meet the requirements in terms of the various protocols for trade. Respect to the second question, could you just remind me of the second question?
That was with the technology in regards to getting around the land availability, so the 3D farming.
Right. No technology can get around land, because you still need something. Unless we're going into the sky, you still need some piece of land to do it on. So no technology can escape the requirements of land, as small as it is. So we are starting with individuals who have no access to land at all. But then again, at the end of the day, and in many ways, admittedly, over the years, I have come to realize that agriculture is more about business and business people than about technocrats. In fact, I think that agriculture will do more and much better. And my fellow colleagues in the country, hearing me say this morning, might hang me. But I believe that agriculture would progress much more in the country if it is being led more by business people than by technocrats. I think our role is limited in suggesting what needs to be done and what can be done and how it should be done. But in terms of the driving force for agriculture in the country, in many ways, I believe agriculture and agricultural commodities are no different from any other commodities in the manufacturing sector. They follow the same principles of business and of management. And so with respect to that, at the end of the day, gravitating towards particular technologies will depend at the end on your cost of production. You can have vertical farming, you can have containerized planting. Well, God forbid if it's marijuana. But we can do all of that. But if at the end of the day, the farmer cannot produce something that is competitive, and even in the Tobago example, you already have to compete with farmers in Trinidad who can produce at a much lower cost than you. So that is one of the major factors also affecting agriculture production in Tobago. At the small scale, the small size of farms that we have, the diseconomies of scale that are associated with that. When you produce your produce, you have to ensure, therefore, that your produce can compete with the price of produce that are similar that are coming from Trinidad. That affects whether you can gain entry into the Trinidad market, whether your produce is going to be accepted in the Tobago market, because I believe, as I always say, people in Trinidad and Tobago, and I can speak more from Tobago because I am from Tobago, we have no loyalty with respect to agriculture. Our loyalty is towards price. So regardless of where it comes from, once it's the best and most affordable price for me, that is what I'm going to spend my money on. If it's from Tobago or Trinidad and it's a little more expensive, we are not going to support it because it's from Trinidad and Tobago. We follow price. So with those things in mind, it makes it extremely difficult sometimes for the farmer in Tobago to be able to compete. And if you're going to introduce a technology that is going to just escalate his cost of production, then technology in many instances can be debilitating.
Hey, good morning. I've listened to some of your suggestions, Mr. Calmurray, but one thing still remains in my mind. Who is a farmer in Tobago? A person between the age of 45 to 50 years. I've looked also at some of the submissions that you all made with the yapper, and some of the findings of the submission is that the graduates are still unable to access state land. So, okay, so you give the graduates training, you give a young person training, but how do you move this person from being a participant to a farmer? What is the roadmap that you all are working on to ensure that young men and women in Tobago could look towards becoming a farmer, having been trained? What is the yardstick you use to at least grant them a start to becoming a farmer? When I say a start, there must be some kind of a qualification after training. So you would say, well, give them a parcel of land, if it's a smaller parcel, or establish a broad estate. What is your plan? I want to hear from you, and I want to hear from the agro investment specialist too.
When the installment of the APA program started in Tobago many years ago, there was the premise made that graduates would have been able to access state lands for farming. As to why that did not transpire, and as to the reasons, I leave that more to the political directorate. The fact at the end of the day is that graduates were not able to do so. And even in our interventions, as far as that were concerned, the last thing I think we were able to broker was that we would start a pilot project with some of the graduates and certain individuals as to them establishing or demonstrating rather that clearly they had intentions of pursuing agriculture as a business and as an enterprise that is going to be sustainable. So we have had limited success, as the evidence shows. We have had very few individuals being granted state lands. My approach to that, which is the approach I believe should always be taken with state lands in Tobago, we certainly believe, and that was adopted as the state land distribution policy some years ago, and I contributed in many ways significantly to that type of submission, that state lands must not be distributed in an ad hoc manner. I come and say, I want a piece of state land to do this, and you give me a piece of state land. It has always been the practice, and this is something that emanated from the ministry many years ago, and followed suit in Tobago years ago when I was a young officer, that the division in its strategic planning will decide what commodities or what type of farming they would like to pursue, and we will have the appropriate blocks of state land designated for that purposes, and then you go through a process of selecting farmers, and we have evidence of that still today. The dairy farmers in Carson Field, the dairy farmers we have at Goldsboro and at Belmont Farm in Mason Hall, where you decide beforehand the development path you wish to take in terms of with agriculture and where you want to go with particular subsectors or industries, and you look at who are the best persons. Certainly the failures both in Trinidad and in Tobago from since the 70s have indicated that we have been very poor at selecting farmers. If it were the other way, then we would have still have a thriving dairy industry, and in many other ways, some of the other areas that were allocated for state land production. And so in our own efforts, we were able to try to at least start this installment with the particular project I mentioned with the Yapa students to demonstrate that they were capable, because it's our intention that the block of area, which is a 2-acre block, and we have 4 of them involved right now, that we would want to make recommendations at the end of the project cycle that the lands be handed over to them, that they will be able to continue on their own as their own enterprise. So that is in itself our way of trying to address that, what you call that logical sequence that you will expect in terms of a roadmap of moving persons that you have trained and engaged for a period of time, right? Luckily, we have had some of them who have had basic qualifications who have moved on to college and to university after the upper experience. But by and large, many of them are high school dropouts, or many of them were not very successful. And by no means it should discriminate against them and their ability to contribute to the agriculture sector. So we hope that we can embark on similar initiatives with the aim of convincing many that these persons should be given the opportunity.
Just to add to what Mr. Murray is saying, I know that the division would have embarked on 2 projects, and he mentioned earlier the Goldsboro Herbal project that is focused on the youth in agriculture. There's also the possibility, not yet implemented, but the Agro Park program that is earmarked for Friendship, where there would be blocks of land that would be designated for youths who want to engage in agriculture. And in that program itself, we are looking at modern technologies, you know, to kind of to improve the yields and the competitiveness of these farmers on these blocks of land. Also, I know recently ADB would have also launched, in terms of financing for the youth in agriculture, a program designated for youth in agriculture. So we are hoping that these initiatives will gel together to also assist in drawing and pulling young people into agriculture.
Mr. Chairman, I know there are many pieces of land in Tobago owned by, like, let's say, a grandfather, grandmother, but according to one of you in your presentation lamented that, you know, many of the young people tend to go to colleges, university, and have abandoned those lands. And I know it's the woe of the owners, maybe the grandmothers and grandfathers, that no one in the family stayed back to cultivate the land in these places. Is there any way that you visit these holdings and seek to advise on how it could be utilized in the meanwhile?
The issues of land in Tobago can be very contentious, because in many instances when there is no clear title, and in many instances when you have several dependents, you do have a lot of instances of quarrels and issues with respect to lands. Even we have had issues where we have had farmers who have been registered on certain parcels of lands as farmers. And when you go there, then we go there to provide services like tractor pull services and stuff like that. We encounter problems. This person no longer is in charge, and he shouldn't have done that in the first place and stuff like that. So that it's an approach that has to be done on a case-by-case basis. In fact, many of some of these lands, and I always tell people when some of these lands are like that, and the reason why nothing is happening, because most time there is some sort of feud at hand. And as much as possible, we do have persons who have coming, people who have come back, some young people sometimes who will coming, and yes, we have lands that were used by our grandparents and stuff like that. We would like to, you know, engage. We deal with it with a case-by-case basis. When we do have requests like that, we try to assist, but in many instances, there are many lands that are in Tobago, private lands that is, that looks abandoned or looks uncultivated. But in many instances, we tell ourselves they are owned by Tobagonians and they are not owned by Tobagonians.
Okay, I have a few comments to make and then to ask a couple of questions. This afternoon, we will be dealing with the issues of the sea bridge and the quality of the service between Scarborough and Port of Spain in particular. And there are challenges as we speak, and probably nobody knows that more than Tobagonians. But having said that, this period of trauma that we have gone through over the last month or so exposes a fundamental weakness with Tobago. There are reports that there are no fresh vegetables in Tobago because the boat didn't sail. People saying there are no bread because the bread van didn't sail. And then I looked at this and I said, at its most fundamental level, here we have our sister island, a proud and self-reliant people for centuries has found itself in such a vulnerable position. That is what the ferry service has exposed, you know. And Tobagonians, please, for heaven's sake, take cognizance of that. There are issues to fix in your economy. You are too vulnerable to these external forces. Having said that, I know the government has a plan to fix the ferry service. And let me just go through some information here that was supplied to us. Provide information on agricultural commodities imported into Tobago. Here what you imported? Roots and tubers, dasheen, cassava, sweet potato, carrots, yams, edus, beet, rhizomes and bulbs, ginger, onion, garlic, local fruits, watermelon, papaya, pineapple, citrus, local fruit and vegetables, tomatoes, sweet pepper, melongen, cucumber, Christophine, bodi, okra, pumpkin, leafy vegetables, lettuce, pak choy, dasheen leaf, that is dasheen bush, you know. That is a kalalu on a Sunday. Green and ripe bananas, green and ripe plantains, seasoning and herbs, shadow benny, parsley, celery, chive, dry and green coconut, meats, well, pork, beef, chicken, goat, what have you, what have you. So you have found yourself in an extremely vulnerable position. And I call on the Department of Food Production, Fisheries and Forestry, that you have a responsibility to this island. That you are the drivers of government policy. And you have a responsibility to come up with some plan that could take Tobago out of this dilemma. Because it is critical. But then there are good sides to the story, because the example I want to draw, as good as Trinidad agricultural production is in certain sectors, when you're going for fresh goat and sheep, everything comes from Tobago. There's a place called Palmyra in San Fernando, just off the highway, which is the Trinidad capital of fresh goat and sheep. And every single sheep or goat they slaughter there comes from Tobago. So something is happening right with sheep and goat. Okay? So if that is your model of success, take that model and see if you could transplant it somewhere else. I don't know what the solutions are, but to me this seabridge issue has exposed at its most fundamental level the structural weaknesses of Tobago's economy, especially as it relates to agriculture and food production. I wish you well. I know you have the skills. I've heard you all speak. I mean, you are world-class technocrats. And I'm sure there are probably world-class farmers there. There's world-class arable land. I'm a geologist. Dr. Rowley is also, Tobago is volcanic soil. It's the richest soils in the world. These soils are present in Grenada and St. Vincent and St. Lucia also. Okay? You're importing the very things you used to produce for years from Grenada and St. Vincent, you know. If the CARICOM jetty work, Tobago in trouble. Okay? So somewhere along the line, you all dropped the ball. And if you pick up back that ball quickly, you will hurt very deeply for it. So I just want to urge you all in the Tobago Society and in particular the department to move with haste and to confront very frontally this whole issue, because it is a crisis. Because when you are unable to, at a minimum, feed yourself with basic commodities, your society is at a great risk. So that's my contribution. I don't know if you want to comment on it, but I just want to say I put the onus on your department, which is the Planning and Policy Division of the State for Agriculture, to with haste, come up with a meaningful and workable solution. It may not be successful in its entirety, but at least start with where your successes are and try to expand that model. I thank you.
Okay, Honourable Member, if I may respond. It did not take the sea bridge to help us to realize the state of agriculture in Tobago. I think we would have realized that a long time ago. In fact, Trinidad and Tobago, and I include Trinidad and Tobago because you're geologists, right? Trinidad and Tobago, it always takes us crisis to understand the need to diversify and to put agriculture at the forefront. So every time we have a crisis with the oil industry, then we hear the talk of diversifying the economy. In fact, I say matter-of-factly to certain individuals, I am not all too bothered sometimes when they say now that we have to do something about agriculture because the oil is failing. Because I have been around in the sector and in the division for 25 years, and my experience has been when the oil plummets to $20 and $30, we say we need to do something about agriculture, and we start, and the bandwagon gets rolling. And then in the next year or two, when the oil prices go up, then everything stops. And the funding just gets withdrawn, and you don't get it. So it's not just a Tobago issue. It's a Trinidad and Tobago issue in terms of the type of political will, in my opinion, to drive agriculture. And I make a statement this morning that may not sound like from that of a technocrat, but I believe that if the government of Trinidad and Tobago really wanted to do something about agriculture, we would have done it. And when I say government, I don't mean existing, but past and present, right? If we really wanted to do something about agriculture in the country, we would have done it.
But let me just interject here.
Minister,
Just one point. All right, go ahead.
need to give another member a chance to contribute.
Okay, I give way.
Thank you very much. I just want to run along the same track that Senator Khan brought on, and I totally agree with you, Mr. Murray. I shadow the Agricultural Ministry in the Parliament, and it's a similar conversation I've been having for the last 2 years. And what is unfortunate this time around, I think we are a long way away from a boom cycle in Trinidad and Tobago. So we are in a long-term bust cycle, which means that we need to create a new normal. And I'm of the view, like yourself, that agriculture is where we ought to be heading. And there are two issues that we must confront, and perhaps it's the same thing here for you in Tobago, that the allocation for agriculture needs to be more meaningful, and the conversation on agriculture should not be done 12 o'clock in the night. It should get prime time. So that being said, I want to ask you quite a number of questions. I have limited time. I would like your responses to be as short and succinct as possible, because one of the functions of this JSC is really to capture your requirement to form part of our reporting. So when we present to the line minister, he can have an idea of what needs to be done in the relevant ministries to help you. I am clear in my understanding that your division, you act as facilitators, you act as regulators to get farmers in and out of the system and to assist them. First question, are you satisfied with the current allocation that you are given to run your division?
No, we are not satisfied. And I'll tell you very quite succinctly, the development project, which is the heart of any division in any ministry, last year we would normally, in the year before, fiscal year before, we would have been allocated about $43 million, which is still insufficient. Last year we got half of that, and that was distributed among 3 projects.
In terms of manpower, technology, other types of resources, what would you tell this committee your primary requirements if you ought to ramp up your delivery as a facilitator and a director in agriculture in Tobago?
Some of the primary resources in terms of, first of all, in terms of beefing up the technical capacity of the division. For years we have been plagued by requests to the Services Commission, to the DPA, to fill many of the vacancies that we have in Tobago. We have been struggling, literally struggling. I have officers at present doubling up and tripling up in various areas, large areas. We have shortages in terms of vacancies where agricultural officers are concerned, agricultural assistants, basic frontline staff. 2008, there was a rationalization of the structure of the department where certain specialized positions were created. To date, they have not been filled, right? So that in terms of some of them not even classified, still up to today. So that the manpower, we have a serious attrition issue in terms of our technical capacity. Many folks have retired and we have not been having replacements. And in terms of the allocation, and I need to pound the word allocation, both on the recurrent and the development side. We are struggling to maintain the stations that we have and the facilities we have, even in maintenance mode, simply because we have not been receiving the allocations. The allocations, I think, in Tobago mirror the same thing as in Trinidad. Of the 8 or 9 divisions, we may be at the bottom of the list somewhere around 7 or 6 in terms of allocations for agriculture. So in terms of, if we are able to get the allocations, we have the projects, we have the initiatives planned. The thing, though, is that we need to have the allocations necessary to drive them and sustain the allocations. Not one year we get some, the next year we get nothing at all, so that we need to, in terms of, so that the inputs in terms of technology, infrastructure, all of that can be possible with allocation.
Let me ask you this, in terms of the percentage of your food import bill in Tobago, do you have an idea? Can you share it right now?
We estimate that we import about 80% of what we consume in Tobago.
80%. If you have, in your expert opinion, over the next 3 to 5 years, what would be the likely figure that you'd like to see that reduced to in terms of being able to have Tobago on a much more stable footing to feed itself?
Let me first of all say that before even the crisis came with the Sea Bridge issue, the Chief Secretary of the Tobago House of Assembly mandated at his inception of office that there needs to be a revitalization of the agriculture sector. He has been very supportive. In fact, he has mandated that an agricultural revitalization plan be prepared, and a team was formed. I am a part of that team, and we are in the process of completing an agricultural revitalization plan through the efforts of a multidisciplinary team from stakeholders. And we have proposed that in the first interim that we attack the whole issue of food importation into Tobago, the first thing in terms of food security. If we were to look at what we have identified in many ways that we can significantly reduce the imports, and we have broken it up into the various commodity groups. Staples such as our sweet potato and stuff like that, we believe that we can reduce that factor significantly in terms of in terms of reducing importation by more than 50% within the next 3 to 5 years. We believe, in fact, in terms of leafy and fruit and vegetables, that we can significantly almost eliminate the need for importation in the next 3 years.
How far are you away from completing that plan?
The plan, more or less, I believe within the next month, it should be finalized and submitted through the Secretary and Administrator of the Division to the Chief Secretary.
If this committee can have a copy of that plan when it has been rationalized and approved by your relevant bodies, yes, and so on, we'd be happy to have it. Right. And going forward, clearly, Senator De Freitas had indicated the issue of participation of young people and that we have a migration away of our young people from the farms. What is your level of participation at tertiary education on the island here, if you have an idea of it? Because that has a correlation, because the more we send our young people out, the less of them are interested in staying in the farming communities. Do you have an idea of the ratio in terms of tertiary education?
In terms of their involvement, yeah, in agriculture, those who pursue the agriculture field. Obviously, most persons who do agriculture work want to work with the ministry, well, in this case, the department. We do have individuals who have shown interest, keen interest, and many of them have applied and they are waiting just like most persons for state lands because they do not have state lands at their disposal. But we do have quite a growing number. In fact, I am very heartened to see of the young cadre of persons coming out, even some of them employed in the Division of Agriculture that work. I'm now heartened to see, as compared to years ago, many of them showing interest in agricultural enterprises. And I'm quite supportive once it doesn't conflict with government time and resources. I am very supportive of that. So I think I have seen strong positive trends where that is concerned of individuals. In fact, I think it's a trend in the country that we are seeing now. I can't, because I'm past that age now, give the terminology for the young people and the generation they have, who are the type now who want to get into business and see themselves as businessmen of the future. And that is quite heartening.
Let me ask you a final question. When we come back to Tobago in 1 year time and we sit at this very same meeting, in your mind, what would be the 2 or 3 items that you hope to accomplish within the next year in terms of your ability as a division to drive change in the sector?
The first thing in my mind, I hope I won't say the year has flown so quickly. But some of the things that we would hope to achieve is that we will be able to complete significant upgrade to some of the facilities we have that farmers rely on, such as for propagation material, for germplasm, for starter livestock, seriously to upgrade and to be able to increase their capacity to supply farmers with that basic startup. I'm hoping that within the next year that we are going to significantly boost our home gardening initiatives, where we can drive homeowners and encourage homeowners to participate more in what they eat, in terms of what they consume by growing what they have, to have a stronger element of local contribution coming from householders in Tobago. I'm hoping that certain infrastructure for agriculture will be significantly improved, such as access roads for farmers, such as irrigation. Hoping that we can take the trend of agricultural production in Tobago away from this rainy season kind of thing when rain comes down to a year-round production system where farmers can consistently and sustainably produce and supply the agricultural sector. Certainly to see in some of the targets that we have established within the next year that we have been able to at least have some sort of initiation, or if not, significantly being able to make inroads into reducing in terms of the import from Tobago by the production initiatives that we will be establishing. Certainly to encourage by next year a greater involvement of the private sector in Tobago significantly in terms of engaging individuals in private partnership, where we ourselves have accepted in the division that we are incapable of facilitating everything in the sector. So that having a great and overall greater involvement with our stakeholders, driving partnerships, driving and encouraging private engagement in the sector, and as well, as much as possible, as we spoke for quite a length this morning, in some way making and having inroads into some specific initiatives to engage young persons in agriculture and have them able to demonstrate their capacity to produce to the basket of Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murray. Thank you.
I'd like to use this opportunity to inform members of the viewing and listening audience that they may send comments via email at parl101@ttparliament.org, on our Facebook page at facebook.com/ttparliament, or on Twitter @ttparliament. We had also invited Assemblyman Duke, and he has informed us that Assemblyman Farley Augustine would represent him. I think that you have some questions which were passed to us by the questions from Assemblyman. Right, the question which was passed by Assemblyman: can you explain the resignation of Messrs. Jordan and Roach from the Board of Directors? Also explain the removal of Mr. Lloyd Blackman as manager.
I am unaware, and we are unaware of the names and the affiliated associations or boards or committees.
Right. Is there any closing statement you would like to make?
Mr. Chairman, let me take the opportunity to thank you all for having us to share our knowledge on agriculture in Tobago. And we look forward, we take on board the comments and the suggestions that were made, and we certainly follow through with them. And with no further ado, thank you.
Thank you for your time and for the candor of your comments. I'd like to also take this opportunity to remind groups and persons who appear before the committee that you are covered by parliamentary privilege when you are making your submissions. We will now suspend this meeting for 3 minutes so that we could prepare for the next group appearing before us. Okay, welcome back. We are about to resume. I would take it that the members of the committee are known to the groups present, so I will now invite the Tobago Agro Processors Association to introduce themselves. Was Jacob, sorry, the Jacob Seafood Company to introduce their representative.
Pleasant good morning. My name is Roy Jacob from Jacob Fishing Enterprises, and I am the managing director.
Okay. One person.
Pleasant good morning. My name is Anandi Jacob, Trisha Jacob as well. Anandi Trisha Jacob, and I am Secretary of Jacob's Seafood and Meat Supplies.
Okay, there's two of them. All Tobago Fisher Folk Association, may now introduce themselves.
Good morning. My name is Junior Koshi, the president of Fisher Folk Tobago.
Pleasant good morning to all. My name is Mr. Curtis Douglas, and I'm the vice president of all Tobago Fisher Folks.
Pleasant good morning. My name is Alice Koshi Cooper, and I'm the secretary of the All Tobago Fisher Folk Association.
Hello, good morning. My name is Frederick Roberts, member of the All Tobago Fisher Folk Association.
Sorry, I'll now invite the president of the All Tobago Fisher Folk Association to make some brief opening remarks.
Good morning again. On behalf of the All Fisher Folk Tobago, it's a pleasure to be here to sit in front of your committee. And I wish that after this session here, we can see a fruit being growing, or a tree being growing after this session here. Thank you.
I extend the same courtesy to Jacob Seafood Company. Brief opening remarks.
Pleasant good morning again. I'm very thankful for having this opportunity where I can meet with the head of departments in Trinidad and in Tobago, where we can work along with each other to see where we can go with the fishing industry and the agriculture sector. But I am hoping that this time is not a talk show, and we should put some action behind what we say today, some weight, that we wouldn't have to come back here and have to ask the same question. When we come back here, we must ask different questions. Thank you all.
Thank you, both gentlemen. I now open the floor to members for questions.
Yes,
Senator Mark.
good morning and welcome. The first question I would like to address to the president of the Fisher Folk of Tobago, as well as Mr. Jacob from the Seafoods Company. How has the sea bridge crisis affected your industry, your activities? Because you produce fish, you need to either export them to Trinidad or maybe extra regionally, or within the region, I should say. And similarly, Mr. Jacob, seafood, you might have to export, I'm assuming. So could you share with this committee how has the current sea bridge crisis affected your respective companies or organizations?
Okay. The sea bridge has affected us very badly. One, for example, I can say I tried to get an engine from Trinidad, a boat engine to come to Tobago. It took me almost a month because I can't get to go and I can't get to come. And if you can't get your engine to come from Trinidad to Tobago just as 2-3 away, it will affect you. And we're losing very badly because you can't get to go to get what you want in Trinidad to come back to Tobago. And if you ask me from Tobago to go to Trinidad, vice versa. So it affects us very badly.
This sea bridge, I think, was a lesson for us. And I like to work when things get hard because I put out my best. Now with the sea bridge, I personally, I have people who work for me, but I personally get on the ball. And I personally feel that it was not so hard for me because I personally go and will do what I have to do and get my things. So for me personally, it wasn't that hard because, as I mentioned to you, when things get hard, I put out my best and I send my people to do the best. So in that situation, the sea bridge wasn't so much a problem to me, sir.
Would you say, Mr. Kwashi, in dollars and cents, value terms, would you say that the fisher folk, could you give us a rough estimate of the collective value that you might have suffered as an organization as a result of this prolonged crisis? And Mr. Jacob, seeing that you have gained, well, I got the impression that you have worked harder as a result of this crisis. Would you want to share with us how this crisis would have benefited you financially in value terms?
Well, it have benefited me because when the other people cannot get around to get their things, I get sales, you understand me? So, and I have storage also. When you're going into any industry or any business that you're going into, you have to look at the input and the output. And you have to approach the bank to get your facilities. I have facilities so that I can purchase and store, and I can even rent at times. So I personally, it was a gain for me.
Yes, well, from the fishing side of it, we have lost. I mean, the money, we can't put a figure to it, but we have lost a great deal because, you know, as when you're applying the trade as a fisherman, obviously we have loans to pay. And we are into a lot of dry fish, where we dry our fish and we try to ship it to Trinidad, and we also try to vacuum and package our fish. And we have a little market in Trinidad where we export our flying fish and stuff like that. So in that case, the sea bridge has been hurting us, hurting our pockets, hurting our homes immensely. And, you know, it's not only a lesson taught, I hope it will be a lesson learned. Because we could sit here, you know, for the entire day and say, you know, what we're going to do, but by the end of the day, the people are suffering. The fishing industry is suffering from this. I don't know about the agriculture industry, I can't speak on their behalf, but I could speak on the fishing behalf. Because when we dry fish and we vacuum it and to export it, to get the boat to go down to Trinidad, to have our little market down there, it hurts our pockets because, I mean, school is open and we are struggling. So in that sense, from the fishing, from ATFA perspective, all the little fishermen who dry the fish because we had to prepare for rainy days are feeling pain. We have tat nails and nails in our shoes when we walk right now. So the sea bridge is playing a major factor on how we live on our day-to-day life.
May I also ask the fisher folk again, directly. In your submission, you indicated that the current state of fisheries or the fisheries industry in Tobago is almost deplorable and having significant negative and adverse effects on your livelihoods as fisher folk. Would you want to share with this committee what are some of these negative effects emanating from what you have described as a deplorable state of the industry?
Well, for example, there is no support from the Fisheries Department. I make no quarrels about it. I'm going to be open and frank about it. There is no support. There is no proper structure. And when we do sit together to have a conversation, to advance or to build a better fisheries and the fishing relationship, it always breaks down. And this has been happening for years. This is not over a year or two. It's been happening for years. And there is no, seem to me there is no structure, and they are not willing to work with the fishing community. I would say that, I'll draw an example. When some of the fisheries officers comes out to some of these depots and we have meeting, instead of they listen to what the fishermen plights are, they want to instruct or demand what fishermen should have and shouldn't have. Instead of you listen and let's sit down and work out an amicable solution that will take the fishing industry forward, they adamant that this is what's going to happen, take it or leave it. And most times, why we are sitting here today is because we have left it. They refuse to listen to the fishermen. They refuse to work with the fishermen. And we are not going to have anything pushed down our throats. You know, so the Fisheries Department on its whole, sorry, has been failing us miserably for years. There's not even a proper director. There's no proper director to even guide us. And even though when we give them our professional advice, they don't listen. Because even in the fishing industry, we've been struggling with oil companies. Oil companies been running their projects and hurting, doing seismic surveys. At one point, we had to take them to court. We had to meet court. When we meet in court, that is a sad day for our fishing industry. When the fisheries who was there supposed to represent the fishermen, we now, on the other hand, have to take them to court for proper representation. Because when these oil companies come, they sit with them and they do their collective bargains. We are not part of it. But they made the decisions for us without even hearing our plights. Right? So when they come and they do the seismic survey, that will mean hardship for fishermen for 2 or 3 years. And our plight was merely, give us some kind of compensation. Give us some form of compensation. And instead of representing us, they misrepresent us at all turns. So, as it stands, we have no confidence in the Fisheries Department. We have no confidence in them representing us at any stage. So anything that goes on, especially these oil companies, we will have to represent ourselves. And that's sad, because we must be able to work together to build a better country and a better nation. Because together we aspire and we expect together we must achieve. But that is not the case. It seemed to me like they are tyrants. And they dictate how and when things should happen, instead of we work as a governing bargaining, where we work together to build a better fishing industry and a better country.
Member Puri. Member Puri is on now.
Okay. Thank you very much. I listened attentively to your contribution, sir, and I hear the pain in terms of the position that you're in. And I too are from Mayaro, and I do have fisher folks who are part of associations, and your concerns, it's very similar, it's the same that I have to deal with as the representative for that area. And they too have the same challenges with the energy companies. What we have been trying to do in Mayaro is to strengthen the fishing organizations and get them talking more one-on-one with the energy companies and so on. I'm not sure how effective that has been so far for you. Have you made any headway in terms of having one-on-one conversations with the energy companies that are interrupting your daily activities?
Well, in the past, what they would have, the energy companies would have, they will have this thing called a consultation. That's where they invite you. By law, they have to have that consultation. By law. It's law, so they have to do it. They have no other choice. So they will meet with us and they talk. They will even bring police, as we are vagabonds and we are aggressive. They will bring police and say, well, you know, whatever. When all we want to do is listen and seek our interests, right? So they will have that consultation. And when we do try to meet them away from that consultation, there's some hesitance in meeting with us. Yes? Because they know there is no representation. There is no one to stand up for us more than we have to stand for ourselves. So we do try to have that rapport, that understanding. We do even try to meet with them half the way or even more. We even go further to meet with them.
How many people are fishing persons are in your organization, members, representatives?
Remember we are talking about the All Tobago Fishing Association. We're not talking villages. For example, I'm the president of the Plymouth Fishing Association, and I have at least over 60 working fishermen in my association. And that's just Plymouth. And it have Castara that probably have about 80, and it have Southwest probably have about 70. So it's probably over 1,000.
Are all these fishermen registered with the necessary fishing authority department of the assembly?
Not the assembly, the fisheries.
Fisheries, sorry.
Yes. Yeah. Most of them I know are registered. All right?
Now, one of the challenges that we found in my arrow in terms of compensation is that several of the fishing organizations, their members, they don't keep records. They don't keep adequate historical records. So when the issue of compensation comes up, then if you can show a historical record of produce over a period of time, it gives an indicator that, look, this is what my losses are. And that has made the progress in terms of compensation and so on a lot easier. It's not that they have gotten as much as they have been asking for, but it has led some way forward in terms of finding a common ground. Has that been your experience in terms of your compensation requirement?
What happened, I would just like to go back a bit. In 2014, there was an initiative, a pilot project that was run by the government, which is the Ministry of Tobago Development, that was run between the fisher folk, which is ATFA, and the government, whereby they had realized that they had that same problem. So they embark on a project whereby they deploy people to different fishing facilities and communities, whereby they collect data. Not only collecting data, they had even go that far by helping some of the fishermen by getting GPS and fish finder, so that data will be collected, and we have people collecting how much ponds of fish a fisherman catch, because if I say, well, my grandfather catch thousands of pounds, there's no evidence to that. So the government have seen fit to embark in that program. So that program was running, and it was running successfully. But for some reason, I think this present government had closed the program down, which is very sad. They had closed down, shut down the program, but that is still there to be retrieved from the ministry, which is probably the government, right? And yes, even though we had that database, fishermen we was documenting, we was keeping documents of our data, but when we speak to the oil companies, they are saying our data wasn't substantial. It wasn't well documented. But if we go out and we catch 50 pounds of fish, it's 50 pounds of bonito by XYZ, 50 pounds of kingfish, 1,000 pounds of flying fish by XYZ. And now, because of not wanting to reason and be fair with the fishermen, you want to use the term that the data that we presented is not clean nor efficient today.
Ask Mr. Joseph a quick question. You run, and I assume it's your personal business. Fishing to you is your business. It is a business organization, correct?
Yes, sir, it is. I run a fish processing plant. Right.
Are you involved in the actual fishing operations, catching and so on, boats and nets and so on? You're on the processing side?
I am not again in the fish catching, because there are serious problems that need to be addressed by the authorities. In this respect, where predatory larceny, like stealing boats and engines, is concerned, I pull out of that, but I am doing fish processing and fish handling. So many of the collections, I have records of all the people who sold fish to me. So whenever they have any problem, they come to me and my secretary will go through with them how many fish they sold to me, how many money they make, and all these things. So that is what I do, sir.
But in terms of if you had to this committee, because clearly I'm hearing that you're saying that the relevant authorities, they are not listening, they are not taking your advice, you have challenges in communicating with them. If we have to put in our report, because you are the best persons to tell us, what are some of the areas that you feel if strengthened over the next 12 to 18 months, even 2 years, it will ameliorate the issues that you are currently having? If you have to put it in a little nutshell for us here.
One, we must have that understanding whereby we, in the agriculture sector, banking, we must be able to have softer loans for fishermen so that we could buy bigger boats, or so we could spend more time at sea, all right? And when we spend more time at sea, we'll now be able to catch and compete and be able to export more of our fish. We must be able to have that conversation where fishermen, and we must have also some way of means of some form of insurance for our boats, because theft is on the rise. Theft is on the rise. And we must have that form of security. Not only that, whereby, you know, you must be secure when you come in, because even that in itself is at a risk, because when you come in with large sum of fish and you're buying and selling, you need some form of security, a little security, right? And also, Liz, we must be able, the government must be able to play some form of a marketing role. That marketing role, government must be able to work with the fishermen so we be able to market our fish internationally. You know, I mean, fisheries do with the ASEP standard training and stuff, all that will come into play, they do, right? Which is ASEP, train and stuff like that. And we must be able to have facilities, proper facilities.
Mr. Joseph, if you could answer the same question.
What's the question again, sir?
If you have to help us identify some of the main areas, in your opinion, that the authorities ought to be looking more carefully and closely at to ameliorate the current issues that you're facing, what would some of those be?
So, I think the landing site is one of them. Also, to be ASEP compliant. Because ASEP, yeah.
Okay.
What I'm saying to you is that, one, over the years, Jacob Fishing Enterprises have pursued to get ASEP compliant. And it's very difficult. We do our part, but the government have a part to play also. The part that they have to play, because that doesn't, the compliance doesn't happen in Tobago. It happens away where the G8 and these people meet, you understand me? So once we have those facilities there, and we are approved by FDA, we can then export our goods, because even the agriculture sector, well, I was down in the mud and in the trench over the years because I grew up in agriculture. I grew tough. Peas, potato, corn, livestock. At one time, the ADB was lending a lot of money to do these things. But after a time, you have so much, you don't know what to do with it. We have to throw away and all these things. So what we are saying, we don't want to make the same mistake again. You know, this fellow sing a song, Looking Back. Looking back must be a foundation. Because I have seen with peas, my parents used to keep me from school to measure garden with Mr. Olwin Brebner, deceased. And after we have all these peas and all these things, most of the time they spoil because the marketing cannot purchase them. But the point I'm making, if then that we have all the different departments, the agriculture department and the fisheries department, the ASEP compliant, and the FDA have these things organized, because when I go to ship fish to the United States or any part in the world, I could ship fish any part in the world. One of the things that you have to do when you are FDA compliant, you have to send a prior notice, like how many pieces you are sending, what time it will land there, what aircraft it coming with or ship, so that the FDA, when it reaches to the consignee, they come and take a part of it, and they go and do their job by inspecting it and test it to see if the bacteria in it, because all things are bacteria, but the level of bacteria, if the level of bacteria is accepted, and once they do that 1 or 2 times with you and they realize that you're doing good, they allow it to go, and they come back and stop again. So all this, with the landing site, I would like to see that happening. But, sir, I believe that the Minister for Agriculture, he have a little too much a job to do. Because when a man have this portfolio, he is the Minister of Food Production, Forestry, and Fishing. I believe that is the reason why at the end of his tenure he's not coming up with a good solution to the problems that we have. Because if you have a legal matter, because in fisheries you have legal matters too, where you will have the Venezuelan come in and fish and you apprehend them. You have to get Coast Guard, you have to get all these people. I think that, I'm a layman, but consider it, the ants, they were very, and they are very important up to now, because they know when things happening before us. So don't look at the hierarchy at all the times. Mix it a little with the people who are in the trench. Don't go abroad to get people to come and do certain things that these people can do it and pay them the money. Use what you have. And I think that if we do that, sir, we can have great success. Concerning fishing also, I would like to see something do properly to protect the fishermen and their boats. You may ask me why I said that, sir. I travel all the islands that do fishing and fish processing. And the way in which they treat their fishermen is different from us. If you go to Barbados, you go to St. Lucia, you go to Dominica, and all these places, and also they are getting funding from the Japanese government also to give them free freezers, free chalk, and all these things, because they want, when you are a friend with them, you can sign for them to catch the whales. Yeah, so they once you sign in with them, they make sure and they treat you very good. But you have to get people who are equipped to do these things. One, before I stop here, sir, is that there are lots of money that floating around all of us here. Free money. But we have to get technical people, smart people, to get this funding to do like research and all these things. And I don't think that we have these people, you know, but we get them doing nothing. We have to wake up. As the oil price and all these things, we are in a little problem. This is the time we should work. And sir, in your ministry, I don't know what ministry you are in, make sure what ministry you're in, you make it work properly. That all of us will, Trinidad and Tobago could be a much better country. We only have 1.5 million people. And with all the money that we have, all the technocrats we have, all these efficient this and that we have, and we can get these things going good, I think that we have failed miserably. And listen, not only failed, we have failed ourselves. And also we have failed Almighty God. Because he gave us all these great resources, oil, gas, fishing, personnel, lands, and all these things. There are people who have worse lands than us. They are doing very good because that is all that they have. But we have so much that we like the dog and the bone. A man doing fishing, sir, permit me to talk, I want to express myself. A man doing fishing, instead of he put all his time into fishing, he want a 5-day walk, he want to walk on the road. By the time he done work, they tired. So most of the fishermen are part-time fishermen. They're not putting their whole body, soul, and spirit into it. So we are in a complaint situation. We're always complaining. Why is, if we take the little that we have, you know what the Bible teaches me? Little is much when God is in it. So I hope I answer your questions properly, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
Good morning, gentlemen. First, let me just make this disclaimer. This particular inquiry into the fisheries sector, I am an individual who works in this industry for the better part of 18 years. Actually went team when I was very young, educated and everything. So I'm just making that disclaimer. So I know a lot about this industry, and I don't want to, let me just tell the guys from ATFA, I know all of them, all of you would have met me in this industry in various capacities. So I don't want to come off as though I'm going against one grouping or in favor of another. And I say that because I'm well aware of the issues in the fisheries industry, both from the side of the fishermen and from the side of government in terms of the department. And I am of the firm belief, and still hold it, that a lot of these issues could be solved because the relationship, as you identified earlier, between the department and the fisher folk is strained, and it's been strained long before I entered the industry, and continues to be strained, and probably will be strained long after I leave if we cannot come to some sort of amicable solution in that regard. But I can give you some advice in terms of my experience globally, education-wise, and seeing it firsthand. In terms of some of the other minor issues. The program that you were talking about that started a few years back is Fisheries. And the reason that that program came about was specifically to address that particular issue regarding recording fish catches coming from the fisher folk. And the point of that was, it was a very, very extensive program. It was a program that did a lot. So you were able to see where the fishermen were. You were able to see what they caught. The fishermen were able to sell the fish before they even touch land, which meant that you can get your money and know how much money you're going to get. You can even get feedback by way of demand, so the customers could tell the fisherman while he's out at sea what it is they want, so they know what to catch. It was a very extensive program and an app that would have worked. I was also there when they were trying to roll it out with consultations, and I saw the feedback from the fishermen, and it was not great. The acceptance of the technology was not great. So saying that it's the department alone is not really entirely true. That's why I'm focusing on that relationship. I also was there when JICA came to Tobago and were doing FADs to help fishermen aggregate their catches. Still wasn't well received at the point in time that I was there. So what I'm saying is that I know the department itself might have its own issues in regards to really dealing with the fishermen and the issue of landing sites and whatnot, which is really physical. But what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot that can be done if you really try to work on that relationship. And let me just give you an example. You speak to compensation from the energy companies. The energy companies have a corporate social responsibility. There are NGOs in this country that are benefiting from that. They would receive money for Save the Sea Turtles, and they would get that money repeatedly because they have that corporate social responsibility which they must meet. I have always believed that with the fishermen, if they're interacting with the energy companies in regards to compensation, one of the things that you have identified as an issue, for example, is going to the banks. The reason why the banks would not give loans for fishermen or even agricultural farmers is because of the risk. The risk of the actual, industry that you're in. You might lose your boat. The fish might not sell. But that doesn't stop you from forming a cooperative and setting up a credit union for yourself. The agricultural farmers did it, Agricola. And therefore, if you're working with the energy companies by way of compensation, and that compensation can be funneled into cooperatives where you set up a credit union for yourself, you've just solved one problem. Because you, setting up the credit union and populating the credit union with individuals from your association, you know the risks and you know the problems that you would have, and therefore can set up a model, because you will hire somebody to do that, to get insurance for your boats and to get loans for your fishing businesses. So you understand what I mean when I say you can solve some of the problems yourselves in regards to those particular issues if you all come together. Let me just ask you a question. How many fishermen are there in Tobago?
About 1,800. And I heard what you said earlier on with the M Fisheries. It wasn't really M Fisheries. It's a small watercraft project by the government of Trinidad and Tobago. So that wasn't really correct. And
so what happened to the M? Do you know what happened with the M Fisheries?
The M Fisheries, no one participated in it. The fishermen decided to participate in the small watercraft project because what the small watercraft project did, it had put almost the same thing like what you said, but they were more enthusiastic in going out and bringing in the data, because what happened, even yes, your wife and all will be able to know where you were in sea, and she's home. So it will eliminate the conflict of people saying fishermen go and do illegal stuff. So your wife or anyone in the office or in the Met building will be able to see where you are, what location you are. In the event of emergency, we'll be able to retrieve you because we had radios to contact Coast Guard, we had GPS. So that communication was there, all right? And, there we go again. I understand what you're saying. I respect your views. I respect what you just said, your advice. But there you go again, telling fishermen again what we should do, right? So you're not listening, right? But that's okay. We are accustomed to that, right? And nothing happens. And all we're saying, we need a start. We must start somewhere, right? We must start somewhere, right? So I understand. So we are not going to wait till we have a cooperative to talk to an oil company that have 20 oil wells to explore shortly. We're not going to wait on that. They must have that conversation, because what that does, it means that you cannot fish in within 500 meters from that. And once they have lights there, it attracts all the fish. Imagine you have food in your house and you can't eat it because of some law, right? And if food is there, you're hungry, but you can't eat it. You can't go within 500 meters of that. So I don't have to go and now open a credit union or
a credit union.
A credit union
as one example.
Before, while that's happening, my child is dying of starvation. They must be able to have that conversation. That's why we have an NGO body, which is ATFA, to be able and fight for us, so that will be treated with respect, because that is where we trade our business. And once we trade our business there, and you come now and telling us we cannot go there anymore, right, to feed our families, that means we must have that level of conversation. And when we don't have conversation anywhere all over the world, if the show is show, when you stop speaking is then when bombs start to drop. We don't want any bombs. We all are Trinbagonians. We benefit from the oil. We benefit from the fish. But we must coexist together. So we don't have to have a cooperative to have that discussion. A cooperative will come after, so that we'll be self-sufficient and we'll be able to grow. But we must have that step to move further. Secondly, Mr. Vice Chairman, one of the things that is plaguing the fishing industry, I must send it with instruments. We don't even have a jetty where we could refuel. It is illegal to even have a gas jug on your van. And there is no facilities in the entire Tobago where you could pull up with your boat and refill. Nothing is stopping the policeman from saying, hey, Mr. Douglas, pull aside, I'm going to give you a ticket. It's the law. I can't go against the law. The law is straight in whatever it says. The law is the law. But yet still, we still have to be full of a jet. We have a jet in Plymouth breakdown. We've been asking, begging, pleading, protesting, deaf ears. So I hope this congregation here, some form of change will come within months. And Plymouth Jetty will be done, and a gas station going to be put up there, and fishermen could go get the gas and stop breaking the law. I hope this congregation will encourage breaking the law. I don't think so. So, those are some of the major issues that are plaguing the fishing industry. And we have, it doesn't matter who you are. Our motto in ADFA, we must be able, as a people, to work together and listen. We have to listen. We have to listen to each other, and let's come up with the best solution to move Trinidad and Tobago forward.
Chairman.
I hear you, and I'm a little surprised because I am the Minister of Energy, and I wasn't even aware that there's no fueling facility anywhere on the coast in Tobago for fishermen. If one is to be constructed, where would you recommend it to be?
Well, it have Plymouth.
No, I don't want to be biased, you know. I
No,
want
I'm
to be
not.
more objective. Thing,
No,
what you're
no,
telling
I'm
me
not.
is
You see what
President
happened?
of Plymouth Association, and
All
then
right. It have Plymouth. It have Plymouth, and it could even be Scarborough. It have Plymouth and Scarborough. Yeah, Castara. It could be Plymouth, Scarborough, even Castara.
But just to make sure, that is where it's easy accessible, because remember there's
Yes,
1,800 fishermen, so you want to make sure easy access to Scarborough. And
I will do my own research, and I want to give a commitment outside of this committee that I will follow up personally on that
Mr.
matter
Khan,
for you.
Minister of Energy, we would like to get some energy in Tobago, where we could fuel easily and be able to go and plight our trade.
Well said and well articulated.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to say that as a member of Parliament for Toko Sangre Grande, I too have been listening to some of the plights that were articulated here this morning, and it were very similar plights that I have to deal with my own constituents. But listening to you this morning, quite clearly coming out from the presentations, we saw you all brought out the point of lack of recognition, you all being labeled, and it brought me back to some of the readings that we have gotten from the different organizations, because the submissions from the Division of Food Production Forestry, they said that they have said that there is continuous communication between the division and the Tobago fisherfolk fish processors. When I look at your submissions, you all said that although the Division of Food Production and Fisheries may have education research programs, they are unknown to the fisher folks. So this morning I want you to clear up first. Are you aware of the division extension officers? Do you know them?
As again, I will say, we all been bullied because sometimes we just see somebody pass in the fishing area. After we ask question, we hear is, that's an officer. It's no proper communication to say, okay, fisheries have 5 officers. These are the 5 officers, Mary, Jane, John, and Henry. It's not no proper communication. It's look at it and then make a complaint.
Right, so therefore there have been no details of the communication programs available to the fisher folks. And I'm certain that you would have listened this morning to the fisheries officer, and he articulated quite an explorative program for agriculture and agro-industry. And I listened to Mr. Taylor, Mr. Jacob, and I must say you said it all. Because coming from some of these submissions from the Ministry of Agriculture officers this morning, they had articulated that between the age of 45 to 50 years, people are loath to accept technological approaches to dealing with things. And listening to you, I realized that you were one of the persons exempt from that, because you articulated a whole measure of experiences that you had, and your willingness to listen to the young person or the technologically advanced person in marrying approaches to dealing with fisheries and fishery production. And I want to ask you, what are some of your solutions in going forward? We have recognized the need for communication, for recognition of both parties here, both the fisher folk and your body, Mr. Jacob. Food industry. What are some of your recommendations this morning, as we leave this morning on this topic? What are some of your recommendations to bring immediate relief, to bring recognition to your body, empowerment, to encourage communication? Well, I know that the members of the Fisheries Department are here and they are listening, so I believe that they have heard. And we would want to suggest that maybe going forward, we'll have better relationships in terms of listening to you, because certainly you're on the ground. You have the practical knowledge of what's happening there. Technologically advanced person who can bring that point, be a coming together of minds to develop a product that you wish to have in not only in Tobago but also in, so that what are some of your immediate suggestions to take us forward? And I will want to say this before I close. I am a fan of flying, but I do not see that amount of flying fish in the supermarket available anymore. I actually questioned it, and somebody said it is being exported. So is this in fact so? And if not, what is really happening?
Let me say something. One of the problems that we have over the past 5, 6, 10 years is the invasion of foreign boats in our water. For example, I could say the Bajans, now in September, they are prepared to come down here and fish from September, October, right back till the season finish, flying fish. And when they fish flying fish, they don't fish flying fish for one day. Then spend weeks out there, day and night. Sometimes 30, 40 boats. And when they fish the flying fish from here, they take it back to Barbados and record it as Barbados flying fish. So it's like you have 40 person against 2. That's the Bajans against we the locals here. So our fish catch government step in with the fishermen, organize the boats, boom, out, and they go fishing. I can recall some years ago, you used to have lights. if you have a 24 to a 25 to a 26-foot boat and about a 150 engine on it, you're supposed to get the VAT off. In Tobago, that don't happen at all. Don't care what we ask, they always tell us no. And I did the research, and the answer is yes. If Trinidad could get it, we could get here likewise. And we're not getting it. Because it happened to me several times. I bought the engine, and after I did the research, and went to Trinidad, I realized I supposed to get the VAT off for the engine. And I had also take my own hard cash to pay for the VAT, and nobody in Tobago gave me a proper answer about it. When I do ask a question, Fisheries tell me they don't know.
Yes, but is the VAT, do you pay the VAT and then the VAT is refundable, or does the people who are selling the boat not supposed to charge you VAT and make their own deductions?
Okay, the process is supposed to be, when you want the engine, you go to Fisheries, make up a form, that you're a registered fisherman, everything is correct. You take it to the dealer, you say, okay, the engine costs $10, the VAT is $2, so you pay $8. If you go to Tobago to do that, they tell you, once you're buying certain size of engine, you cannot get the VAT off. And it is not truth. I can tell you clearly that if you, for example, I just bought a new 200 four-stroke because of the fluid system, fuel price. I bought a new one. My boat is a 29-footer. I entitled for the VAT off. When I went to Fisheries, I was blanked in Tobago. I went to Trinidad, and they told me, yes, I could get it off. But I don't pay my VAT already. So I'm seeking further interest how to get my VAT money back. Right?
Well, we'll have to check that too, because the Parliament doesn't make laws for Trinidad.
Exactly.
Nor does it make laws for Tobago.
Exactly.
Every single law that is passed in terms of taxation are the laws of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
I know of no instance where Trinidad is entitled to something and Tobago isn't, or vice versa.
Yes.
So
it's happening.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, for example, if we leave it to go to buy mankin to buy tackling. Last time I went by mankin to buy tackling fishing line, and I was told that by the fisheries officer that I can't get VAT off. I said, why? It's a pleasure reel, that is rod and reel. And I told you no. I said, we gone past the days we fishing rod and reel now. And I had to go into fisheries and make noise to get my VAT off. And in Tobago, they're telling me no, I can't get off. So I would like you to get this thing point clear, the Minister of Fisheries, but everything clear.
Mr. Chairman, I want to request.
Sorry. I now need to invite board groups to make their closing statements.
Oh, sorry.
I will start with Mr. Jacob at the back.
I, from Jacob Fishing Enterprises Limited, I personally am glad to see that we reached to the head this morning. All the time we were underneath, but it's the old saying, if you want good water, go to the head. So we are in the head this morning and we are in the fountain. But there are certain things that I want to reiterate. Is one, sir, the Director of Fisheries is in Trinidad. And over the years, we struggle with getting things done. And to get on that line, to call the Director of Fisheries is very difficult. And I want you to try it to Mr. Mark. I know that you are a fellow who try to get things done, but you must try to see if you can get the Fisheries Director at times. It's very difficult. So I think something should be done in Tobago that when we're dealing with fisheries business and it's a situation where the director have to handle it, you must have somebody in Tobago. I don't think that we are all not qualified to handle certain things, to stamp certain documents. Oh gosh. We have to leave here, we have to call how much time, spend time on phone. A stamp, we could get somebody with a stamp here, the fisheries officer, to do something for us instead of depending on the director. It's one director. The director can't share in two, but the director must have somebody in Tobago that is qualified enough to stamp documents and all. It's very difficult, sir. The other thing I want you all to remember I don't want to forget because I write it down, you know. And I will make sure and call you all. I'll get you all number and call you. Proper landing site. Security for boats. Area for collection of data so that nobody had to come and ask me no question about you could remember we catch some fish this and this time. They must be able to get it from the fisheries department. They mustn't come by me and sit down, keep them in my office, and I have to get my secretary here to go through them page by page or by the computer. They must have a collection center. The fisheries officer must be more active and be more recognizable. Go in the fish processing plant. I remember quite well Mr. Jordan and those fellas. They used to come in our place, ask a question. When last a director, a fisheries officer come, I mean none. And the reason why I say none, I get it Tobago thing, none. A place for boat repair, it really hard in Tobago to have you must get a center for where we can repair boats. If you go in St. Lucia, I went in St. Lucia and I see it's a very nice model that you can choose from. The small boats, they pull it up. They have the facilities there, the landing site. They have like an area where you have like, they have a gate and it's a narrow area to come out. So when they could know how many people leave the area to go out and who comes in. So it's like a security. And also they have all the facilities there. I believe it's the Japanese government that actually gave them that, I believe. So you all can find out that for me, please. Remember the gas subsidy. Years ago when I used to fish, I used to have gas subsidy. I don't know if it still applies, Mr. Khan, to us. So you must look at that and see where the fishermen can have a subsidy for gas. The other thing also that is very important that Mr. Kwashi had mentioned about is about illegal fishing in our waters. And now I had to stretch my foot on both sides. I was told by some of the people who apprehend these illegal people, they have a call and say to release these men. I don't know, Mr. Khan, if you can look into that, or the person who in charge of national security, that to do something serious, that the people who are doing illegal fishing, they will realize that we have things in place that we will apprehend them and charge them also. The other thing you talk about flying fish, Ms. Lady, I want to answer that question. From the time the site mix project started in Tobago, we have a rapid decline on flying fish. And not only flying fish, the other pelagic species. Because you know, the flying fish, they are the ones who bring the other fishes like the marlin, and all these other fishes. Dolphin and all these things. So since they started that, we have a decline in fish catch. Also, sir, I would like you all to make it more easy for like people doing fish processing or people who are in agriculture sector. If our people in Tobago don't want to work, bring people from outside. But you must have a control of it. The people, you must get a count on them, how many people you need. If we want, for instance, I bring people from away already. I had to run in Trinidad about 50 times, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, to have documents. I think all those things you could ease us up to get some of these things happening to Tobago. Well, we put in Tobago in a place like we are not qualified. All the qualified people, I'm asking you this evening to, we realize that we are not qualified, so we have to do something else. There are qualified people here who can do the job. I'm not saying doing the job they're compromising. Go through the same legal process, all the documents and all these things, stamp it and all these things, but make it easier for us. For instance, I want somebody to help me in my fish processing plant, because I have other products that I want to put on the market. But Mr. Khan, I will give you a taste of my product, one of the product. And I will give you a few packs of flying fish free to take back to try. And to see how the Tobagonian can do things. The flying fish that you asked for, Miss, we cannot export flying fish again until the stock comes up. I don't know what happened with the stocks, but also we should have somebody or some people, when you go in the fisheries department and ask question, they can't answer your question because I don't know if it's too big for them. You ask, what you think causing the problem? Why we are not catching much flying fish? The Barbados people know it because they are dependent on fishing for some of their people, and they are very serious. The government have put money into the fishing industry, and also they have made soft loans. The ADB bank must not only sit down in their offices, they must come out and meet the people. So, there are some people who have very brilliant ideas, but to put them together, to write up a plan, we can't do that. Our left school has standard one. But we are very, with our hands, we can work with our hands. But some of them want some direction because, and technical assistance. For instance, the ADB bank, for me to get money in ADB bank, you know what I had to do? Look at me. I have to go and talk to one of the officer there, was Mr. Westfield at those times, to get money to run my place. Paper about this. Papers, they get everything. They tie up all the property, they tie up all the equipment, they take the serial number and all these things. And you know what they did? They didn't lend me the money. But what I did behind their back, I asked for the directors to come in Tobago. And they visit my plant. And when they see, they ask, Mr. Jacob, what is the problem? Why are you not getting money? I said, sir, the ADB bank, they are very, very, very spiteful in certain areas. Why do they have to ask for all these things? And listen, Mr. Khan, they tie up certain things for me. And in order for me to get more money, I have to go to the same director and say, listen, sir, there are certain things you all owe illegal for me, illegally. And what I did, I looked for a private valuator to value my property and value the equipment and say, listen, what do you want? What do you want for this money? And then they say that they want this, and so they release some of my things. So the point I'm making, Mr. Khan, I know that you all can do it, you all can help us. Don't look for position and sit down there and see people crying and because listen, if Jesus is in a position, if he do us that, you know we're in trouble? So Mr. Khan and the lady who asked for the flying fish, I have flying fish at my supermarket. I sell in there, and the reason why I keep it for, I'm a patriotic. I keep it for the people here to taste flying fish until the next season starts again. So what I have, I didn't send it away. I keep it there, even though I will make a few more dollars outside, US dollars.
Excuse me, Mr. Jacob, but you have a minute left.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Yeah, Fisher Folk, closing remarks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Jacob. He's very passionate about Tobago. One thing before, as I make my closing remarks, it will be nice. It will really be nice if the Bajans can now buy flying fish from us instead of coming in our waters and taking our fish illegally and taking it and say it's theirs. Hence the reason that will boost our economy, that will boost the fishing industry. Flying fish is a very cheap commodity. Obviously, you have to catch it and prepare it. So instead of them coming from Quiet Barbados, they could come to Trinidad, to Tobago waters. Fishermen will supply them. I'm asking them, this is an idea. They could buy the fish from us, right? And also, it will create that boom in the flying fish industry. And would also be able, I hope it doesn't let your business suffer, Mr. Jacob.
Never.
I hope it will boom even more, right? So that more Mr. Jacob we could establish on the island. And it will be so nice, after all that is said, that could be incorporated in our school feeding program. This is not about we, it's about our island. We could incorporate it in our school feeding program because it's relatively, because it's $25 and $30 a pound. Where you have to pay how much? $5 a pound for flying fish. Do the maths. And we need to watch how we spend our pennies. We need to. So if, and the Venezuelans, if we could get our Coast Guard to do their jobs, it will help stop crime because it contributes to illegal fishing and also illegal weapons they bring in. I'm not scared to say it. They are bringing illegal weapons here. And these are things we have to take notice of because we all know a bullet doesn't have a name on it. And we need to start somewhere. So when we start to control our borders, then we could move further. So we incorporate the Bajans to buy flying fish from us, and we'll be able to export. And we also move forward in getting the gas station, landing facilities, proper icing. We must have a cooperation. But by the end of the day, all of us here, each Tobagonian and each Trinidadian, must be able to take back Trinidad and Tobago and work together. We must work together. It's not about whose side or that side. It's about me and you and our children. Because if we do not take stock now, we are dying. Our kids and grandkids are behind coming. And what legacy are we going to leave? One of non-productivity, none of willing not to work together. We have to leave that legacy to show that despite of our affiliation, we must be able to work together. And Trinidad and Tobago lives matters. Thank you.
Okay, and I think that's a good note on which we close this session. We'll suspend for 3 minutes so that we could accommodate the next grouping. Thank you, gentlemen. We now stand suspended. Good morning, and I believe it's still morning. Right, it's still morning. And welcome. We are resuming our inquiry into food production in Tobago, the agricultural sector. I now wish to welcome the Tobago Agro Processors Association, the Tobago Hotel and Tourism Association, and the Tobago Agricultural Society. I will take it that you all are familiar, having been in the audience before with the members of the committee. So I will now ask Tobago Agro Processors Association to introduce themselves.
Good morning. My name is Darylyn Smart, and I'm the present chairperson of the Tobago Agro Processors Association. And along with me is Mr. Merville Wallace, who is a steering committee member of that said association.
Thank you, and I will now ask the Tobago Hotel and Tourism Association to introduce themselves.
Good morning, Chairman and Committee. Thank you for inviting us to speak. My name is Chris James. I'm the President of the Tobago Hotel and Tourism Association. My colleagues this morning are Kay Trotman, Didan Daniels, and Ted Gregg. We all represent the tourism sector. Thank you.
Tobago Agricultural Society.
Hi, good morning. My name is Mr. Neptune. I'm the President of the Tobago Agricultural Society, and I'll ask the members to introduce themselves.
Pleasant good morning. I'm Gladstone Solomon. I'm the Assistant Secretary of the Society.
Pleasant good morning all. O.J. Alexander, Treasurer, Office Manager.
My name is Junior Archer. I'm one of the trustees of the Tobago Agricultural Society.
That's it. Okay, we now begin the question period, and who will be going first?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Let me welcome and thank the members from the respective associations for being here today. I wanted to ask Mr. James whether you'd like to share with us the experiences you have had and maybe suggestions you'd like to proffer as it relates to the relationship between the hoteliers and the various bodies represented here, the agro processors, the Agricultural Society of Tobago, in the supply of local produce for the hotel industry, small and medium and large, and given the thrust that is needed towards diversifying our economy away from oil and gas, what has been the experience, the challenges, and what would be your suggestions and or recommendations to really put this relationship on a firmer course or basis?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mark. The Tourism Division, Tourism Association is part of a whole group of people that are looking at agriculture again. Back 10 years ago, we had an Adopt a Farmer program that allowed us to, a hotel would adopt a farming cooperative that would supply. But because our international arrivals dropped so much, that became economically less viable. So we're looking at that again. Mr. Murray this morning mentioned a very important thing. It's not only we don't only want to diversify into agriculture, we want to diversify into tourism. And we believe that we can add tremendous value to agriculture through tourism. He made a point, Mr. Murray, this morning that the value that we can put on locally grown from farm to plate agriculture is a tremendous marketing opportunity for the tourism industry. So that is a real plus. From the point of view of what we're doing, the Hotel Association has formed another association in conjunction with 25, I believe it is now, associations called the Alliance of Tobago Associations, which takes into account all the farmers, the fisheries, everybody across, the agro-processors. Everybody is working together to look at the demand that we know we can create. The good thing about tourism as an industry, we can actually predict the needs due to our peak seasons and all of this. We can actually tell farmers what we need at different times. But let me ask Dan Daniels to give you some facts of why it's difficult, why we're having some of the challenges. Dan, if you'd like to answer some of those.
Well, good morning, members. This morning, Mr. Murray outlined some of the issues that plaguing the agricultural industry. Some of the things we recognize from our own examination of what has transpired, including things like proper coordination between the agricultural department and the different linkages that exist. To date, there is still no proper linkage with the school feeding program. There is no proper linkage with the tourism industry in terms of getting the necessaries. You see, especially, let me just say this about the tourism. Tourism has evolved over the years, and one of the things that really add value to the tourism industry is the whole thing about experiences, and the culinary part is part of the experience that we could extract a lot of value from. That component seems to be missing as part of the whole thing. We find also when we look at the whole structure of the economy, especially as it relates to Tobago, I think Member Mark alluded to it earlier. Based on our estimates, 76% of the workforce in Tobago is employed by the Tobago House of Assembly. The effect that has on the agriculture is that it takes away the needed labor supply that could be channeled into agriculture. And even if you have some of these labor in some of these social programs, the URP and the CPEP and so on, they are not even being deployed within the industry. I know they had started some initiatives, but it was it flopped soon thereafter. So those are some of the things we recognize. Also, the amount of money that is spent on developmental program. When we look at the budget statement that was presented by the THA, about 17% of the allocation is allocated towards development program. That alone, if you follow it through, you could see hardly anything will happen as a result. Because yes, they may ask for the money, but they may not get it. And so the way how it will impact the industry, they would have a knock-on effect, right? So in addition to that, there's an absence of market intelligence. You hardly see the deployment of market intelligence so that people, well, the farmers, would operate in a much more efficient way. You see, it's very competitive. Mr. Murray alluded to the whole thing about price being the primary determinant. And you need to find all the areas where you could squeeze out some little efficiencies. And because of the lack of market intelligence, you aren't able to identify those areas and exploit them, right? So we need the capabilities of the major drivers in the industry to be in these areas so that we could be able to get the benefits that we're looking at.
Would you say, Mr. James, that the Tobago House of Assembly model in terms of its business model, its development thrust, runs counterproductive to the aspirations and the, let's say, direction of your organization, the Agricultural Society's goals, as well as the Agro-Processing Association goals in trying to revolutionize how business is conducted, to make Tobago more self-sufficient, to make Tobago more independent in terms of its economic development. And as my brother said, Mr. Daniel, if the Tobago House of Assembly is employing 76% of the workforce, it means to say that there is little room for the deployment of labor, right? And there's little incentive for the private sector to get involved in agriculture because there's no supply of labor when it is being captured, hijacked, monopolized by the THA. What are the recommendations on the way forward to alter this model in an effort to bring about the kind of sustainability and independence and development for Tobago for the future.
Okay, thank you. Yep. Let me just correct the figure. It's 73.8%. According to the Oxford Business Group's latest report, it's 73.8% of the workforce works for the THA. That's the figure. And yes, you're correct. In our view, as private sector people, that is a non-sustainable number. It's a non-sustainable number of people to employ in the public sector. And it gives very little room to expand the private sector. As Dan had said, a very small amount of the requested budget, and I think it's about over 90% of the budget is for recurrent expenditure every year. So it gives very little room for development. We strongly believe that tourism can be the economic driver of the economy of Tobago, with very close linkages with agro-processing and agriculture and fisheries, because we can add value to our own product, our tourism product, by the use of the agriculture, fisheries and agro-processing. To me, it's a non-brainer. The country needs foreign exchange. The tourism industry is an earner of foreign exchange. So we can have that benefit for the country of Trinidad and Tobago. When we had large numbers of arrivals, it has to be remembered our international arrivals have dropped from close to 88,000 in 2005 down to 19,000 last year. We have lost our international market substantially. That international market was bringing in the foreign exchange, was allowing them to taste what we have, experience what we have, and would, if it continued, would have created an export possibility market for agriculture processors, agro-processors. So to me, there is, and to the industry, the associations, there is a clear need for a private sector-driven economy in Tobago. In our view, because we're tourism, we believe the economic driver can be tourism, but that tourism economic driver can support many downstream industries, the craft industry, the entertainment industry, as well as the agriculture and agro-processing. So to me, it needs to be realigned. The society in Tobago needs to be realigned. I know it's not easy. With that level of employment in the THA, it's a very difficult decision to let those people go and train them to different industries. But we do have a shortage of people that want to work in the industry. As Mr. Jacobs said, it's impossible to get workers.
Senator DeFreitas.
Good morning, members of the panel again. I just want to create a particular perspective, because you guys represent sort of the end user of the agricultural products that would be grown. So I want to get an understanding of, as it is right now, based on the state of the agricultural sector in Tobago, what percentage of what is produced in Tobago do you guys use, either in the hotel association or agro-processors? Do you have an idea of exactly what percentage of local agriculture produce is used by your entities right now?
The answer is no. The data is not collected. We know that, I think it's 82%, Dan, of the agriculture requirements come from Trinidad. It's not disaggregated as to what we buy is from Tobago or Trinidad. What the Adopt a Farmer program will do, which is what we're trying to relaunch, Ted Gregg is spearheading that, is that will give the farmers the economies of scale they need. This is the challenge we had. The program we had before gave them the economies of scale needed and the certainty of a market when we had that linkage with the hotels. It only failed because we lost such a large amount of our international visitors. And this is why the ferry became such an issue. We turned our dependency onto the local market, the domestic market. And that's why the loss of that ferry, having lost the international market and then turning our focus on the domestic market, having lost that during especially the July and August period. So, but again, there is not even any capture on the quality, the quantity of money to be made from that. There is no, we know from different reports that we have, reports have been done. The Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association, with our sister organization in Trinidad, has done reports on the consumption of the tourism industry. We have reports to show. And when you go back and you look at even what the World Travel and Tourism Council showed us, we were employing back in 2009 almost 50% of the working population. The tourism industry was employing, I think it was 39% of the working population. We accounted for 98.4% of the exports from Tobago as a tourism industry. Now, when you start supplying that, nobody's done that calculation of what a tourist is worth to this destination in terms of agriculture. We know that I used to be on the CTO board, and one of the things that was clear to us is that in Trinidad and Tobago, we retain the highest percentage of the tourism dollar. Over 70 cents of every dollar is retained in Trinidad and Tobago because we buy almost everything from Trinidad. When you go to the Bahamas, it's less than 15 cents of the dollar is retained. So tourism has not been taken seriously. The effects it has on these add-on industries, the agriculture and all of those, have never been quantified in financial terms or in job creation terms. We know that tourism is the largest creator of jobs in the world. We know it's the fastest growing industry in the world. This is an industry that we should be taking care of, and it should be quantified not only as the hotel, the benefit of a hotel, but also the benefit to agro-processors, the farmers, the fishermen. We need to quantify that, and also the consumption from Trinidad. So we don't have the figures. We do not have the data.
All right, and the reason I was asking that line of question is because I'm trying to understand all of the relationships, because in my mind it's supposed to be that you have farmers in Tobago growing particular produce, and there's a demand created by the end user, which would be you guys, and then the farmers would grow to meet that demand, and then as you expand, that circle or that cycle advances. So we've heard this morning from the technocrats that there's issues with getting people into the agricultural sector, land availability and other stuff. So I understand that the capacity to grow there might be a problem. But I just heard you speak about the Adopt a Farm program. Could you just give me an idea of exactly what that entails?
Pleasant morning to the committee and the panel. Just to give you a little bit of synopsis on the Adopt a Farmer program, in 2006, 2007, thereabout, there was a program that was funded by a charity organization called Travel Foundation UK, which was basically taking some funds from the visitors who were visiting the island of Tobago and putting it into a fund to support programs within the Caribbean. In this case, it was Tobago. And those were tourism initiated programs. So one of the projects was, in fact, among a number of projects, was in fact a program called the Adopt a Farmer, whereby we engaged local suppliers with hotels so that those farmers would be able to supply the properties with the produce and so on. That was quite successful because we saw the opportunity so that visitors would be able to come and see the produce that is grown by locals, and there was a tag phrase that goes, caring for places that we love to visit. So they themselves were willing to contribute a $1 pound to the fund. And I did indicate that it was quite a successful program. But going forward, in today's current situation, and this is where I want to make mention because of the ferry situation and so on, we know for a fact that quite a number of the imports for Tobago consumption is in fact coming from Trinidad. And we also had a challenge where the Adopt a Farmer program came to an end as a result of the decline in tourism. But we saw an opportunity whereby local farmers can once again get involved by working together with the hotels and the restaurants and so on. There's a unit, of course, which I'm spearheading right now. We have already visited a number of properties throughout the island of Tobago. We have visited a number of farms throughout Tobago. We have even extended it to the schools, whereby we would in fact engage the farmers to start growing stuff to supply the various properties. And I must say that those responses has been very positive. We have met, like I said, a number of the local farmers and going through exactly what are they able to grow. Most of the items are pretty common in terms of consumption with the hotels. What we're also looking at is something called production planning, because we do not want to find ourselves in a situation where a hotel or restaurant is making an order and they're not able to supply. So we have the program where a few farmers would be able to grow certain types of items over a period of time, so that when one stock is completed, another farmer will be able to continue to supply. We also put a coordinator to link this together, because that person will be able to now liaise with the various properties to get something what you call the occupancy of forward occupancy levels. So like on a quarterly basis, we'll be able to identify exactly what are the occupancy levels within the respective properties and initiate it to the local farmers so that we'll be able to grow accordingly.
No, well, I'm glad to hear that, because I'm hearing that it's a lot of data. It's data-driven in regards to the connection between the two. So I'm understanding now that one of the issues is there's a drop in supply because of the issues there, and then there's a drop in demand on your side because of the decline in the tourist industry.
But let me just answer your question more directly.
Sure.
I am, from what you said earlier, we truly believe, having spoken to the Agriculture Society and to the agro-processors, once there is a business model that people know they're going to make money and it's sustainable, they will come into the business. We showed that before. When we did the Adopt a Farmer program, people were coming into the business to do it. Once you have a committed market, once you know you have a market to supply, and the economies of scale work for you, you will come into that market. So I don't think, and I'm sure Mr. Murchison can add to this, because he's told me of people that are interested to come into this. I'm sure we will find people that will do this once we can convince them that there is a business which is sustainable and long-term.
All right, the Adopt a Farm program, as much as it was under the Tourism Association, agro-processors, do you all also have a similar program, or can the Adopt a Farm program be expanded to the agro-processors, which is another avenue by which the farmers can get to a market? Because your market is where?
Our market is the supermarkets, the mini-marts, the hotels. So we have linked with not the Adopt a Farmer, but the hotel, the ATA Association, and that initiative, so that we can get some of our processed products into the hotels and the restaurants and that sort of thing. So things like the indigenous jams and jellies, unique things, sauces, and those sort of things that we can now work with the hoteliers and the restaurateurs to get some of those things showcased at their restaurants and also be served on their buffet as well.
So there's a decline in your market as well, because you're speaking of restaurants. As much as it's a wider customer base, supermarkets, yes, restaurants, hotels, is there a decline in demand from your market for your products?
There is a drastic decline. Most of our processors right now, who are members of our association, is struggling. The Sea Bridge definitely did not help, because most of our members get the majority of their produce from Trinidad. So their raw material come from Trinidad, along with all of their packaging material. And with the cargo vessel and the fast ferry giving problems, we have had some devastating effects on the agro-processed things. Some of our processors contracts with Massy stores and True Value and that sort of thing has been compromised because you can't deliver on time. Some of the products are being discontinued because you can't get your products across, and then you can't get the sailings to get your products. So we have some challenges.
All right, and the reason I was asking all of those questions, because I was going to suggest that we expand the Adopt a Farm program. It sounds like a very good initiative across a wide array of end users, but that would require that your markets have an upturn, obviously. So I understand in terms of the wheels and the connections, what is happening there.
But apart from that, if I may add, the Adopt a Farmer sort of variant that we're looking at with this new association of Tobago associations, it is meant to cross all the sectors right across to the agro-processors. What we have recognized is that in looking at the agriculture industry and all the industries in Tobago, we are very much operating in silos, so that the agro-processors may have their own, the tourism may have their own, but we have not developed the linkages that are there, and to strengthen them in such a way that once you do a work in one area, it has rippling effects all the way through. So this association is meant to strengthen that sort of network. And the whole thing about it is that if we listen to what some of our predecessors said in terms of Mr. Jacob and the fisher folk, and even what the Agriculture Division has said, we do have a people capacity problem. And in developing the agriculture sector, we have to recognize what is the profile of the people capacity that we do have. So as we seek to find a model, a business model for developing the industry, we may have to make our farmers and our fishermen be good farmers and good fishermen, but that don't make them good entrepreneurs in terms of good business people. We need to so develop the industry that a class of entrepreneurs that are the middlemen, the distributors that will connect the producers to the end users happens. And that is where our farmers or our fishermen or even some of our processors may be having their challenges. And if I was to listen to Mr. Douglas when he said, we may be telling them what to do, start an agri-co-op. But if we listen to what is not said, what is not said is, this is not my competency and I don't want to get involved in that. But I am not opposed to linking with other associations or other groupings that may have that as their competency. So as we look at developing the agriculture sector or any of the sectors in Tobago on a wider basis, we may have to decide what is the business model we want to develop and not try to make specialists, people who are good at everything. So a farmer will be a farmer, he will be good at producing. We need to get to his farm to get what he has to take to the end user. So in our developing the agriculture industry, we probably need to look at that part of development where we kind of make room for the creation of that go-between that links producer to end user.
Mr. Khan?
I just want to make a short intervention because we're here to discuss the agriculture sector in Tobago. Now, I was taken aback by the Tourism and Hotel Association, and I was about to ask the agro processors if agriculture production is down to such an extent in Tobago, what is the source of your raw material? And you just answered. So, Tobago agro processors, who is not using Tobago as its source of its raw material, has a problem. And by the same token, Mr. James, in giving his discourse, didn't really differentiate local produce in terms of Tobago and Trinidad, because he gets 80% local as distinct from the Bahamas, where there's migration of all the income, the foreign exchange, back to the US to buy goods and services. So we could take the position that local is local. There's one country, Trinidad and Tobago. So if a guy has a factory in San Fernando making seasoning, it matters not to Trinidad whether he sources his seasoning from Paramin. Even though Paramin is not close to San Fernando, it's way to the north. So the San Fernandian businessman wouldn't say, I must get my produce from San Fernando and environs. He gets it from Paramin or wheresoever, or Aranguez or wherever. However, while we could use that model and that argument in law, Tobago is unique. Tobago is an island, a separate island, a separate geography, a separate history, a separate culture. So you have to see yourselves as an entity. I mean, always stay the unitary state, if I should say so myself. But you have to see that. So that's why I wanted to direct my question now to the Agricultural Society. We've heard a lot about why agricultural production is so low. And I just want to get your perspective from the Agricultural Society as to what you think the challenges are. Because I made the point earlier to the other group. You import everything in Tobago. I read out the list. Good? But in Trinidad, anytime you buy fresh goat or sheep, it comes from Tobago. So something about the goat and sheep industry here is working well. I don't know if it's large farms or a series of small holdings, family holdings, but I can tell you If you go to South Trinidad, where the curry goat is a delicacy, every single shop that sells local goat, and local goat is $35 or $40 a pound, eh? And for Christmas it reaches as high as $50 and $55 a pound. I don't know how much they pay Tobagonians for it. But the point I'm making, you have an industry that has been successful here for whatever reason, and I just want the agricultural society to respond and see if you could bring a greater level of clarity to us as to what really the challenges are in terms of agricultural production.
Thank you very much, sir. Well, over the years, we have had a number of challenges affecting the farmer's ability to really produce. In fact, if you would have gone back to as far as 1994, ICA would have done a study and would have highlighted a number of factors affecting agricultural production in Tobago. And 20-something years after, when the division would have produced their strategic plan, we have the same problems being highlighted again. So over the years, farmers have been operating and been affected by the same problem, perennial problems. Obviously, farmers will be frustrated. They will not want to go back to the lands if they have these same problems year after year. In fact, I should mention that the society would have visited the Goldsboro Farmers Association last night. They had a monthly meeting. And those farmers, well, they want to say that they want to go and see the chief secretary because one of the major problems is water. And there was a well that was dug some years ago, over 10 years ago, to provide water for the farmers here. And up to this day, they are able to get access water from that well. And obviously going to be frustrated. So once you have farmers being affected by these problems year after year, I will just highlight some of these problems. The availability of lands. There are farmers who would have applied for lands for the last 10, 15 years and not be able to get lands to produce. And some of these farmers are serious farmers who really want to produce, who want to expand their operations. And once you have that situation where you have applied for lands 10, 15 years and you can't get it, and then you see our next man apply for land 2 years ago and he get land, obviously that's going to cause problems. And that same problem would have gotten his land 2, 3 years ago. Is doing nothing on the land. You understand? There are some farmers who were given land, major portion of land years ago, and they are not planting. Instead, they are building houses on the land. Right? So obviously, these problems, these issues are going to create problems for frustrated farmers who really want to produce. Right? So that's one major problem. We have the high cost of inputs. Right? So obviously, the cost of product, we say we're getting cheaper things from Trinidad, but obviously, most of these inputs come from Trinidad, and the farmers here are faced with a higher cost of these inputs. Obviously, the end products would be a little higher. But I can tell you, although these products might be a little higher, the quality of the products you get from Tobago will be much higher than you get from Trinidad. The consumers will tell you that. Because from the time the products take to come to Tobago, they lose their quality. And consumers will tell you that products coming from Trinidad sometime after a day or two, they start to melt. I actually have that experience. So definitely, although the price may be a little higher, we can definitely say quality is better. You get fresher goods here, much higher quality. Breeder larceny. There are farmers who would have gone out of business because of breeder larceny. And the society, in its effort, we represent, we support, and we promote the interests of the farmers. And over the years, we have been making representation on this issue to the division, and we have had no action. In fact, previously, we had a breeder larceny squad in Tobago. That squad has been disbanded, and we no longer get the support from the police. In fact, farmers get so frustrated now that when they lose something or they lose crops or anything, they no longer go to the police because it's a waste of time. It's a waste of time. The police come, they take information, they don't come back. They don't follow up on it. So it doesn't make any sense if farmers reporting breeder larceny to the police again. I mentioned inadequate water supply, especially in the dry season. Farmers are frustrated because they cannot get enough water. We'd have gone to WASA. WASA say they're going to help, but they can help so much because they're saying that we don't get enough water. The amount of water we have in Tobago is not enough to cater for all the various subsectors. And therefore, farmers suffer. There are farmers who, for example, stop planting in the dry season because of that problem. So that is a serious problem again. Marketing. Marketing is another serious problem. The whole marketing system in Tobago is in shambles. I'm a farmer. I'm a major farmer in Tobago, and what I find is that there are some young farmers, for example, when they plant a crop and they can't get a market, they'll call Mr. Neptune. Mr. Neptune, I have this, I have that. Where can I find a market? You know, the wholesale, we don't have a wholesale market. From time to time, I have been advocating for a wholesale market because in Trinidad, the farmers benefit from this because when they have their produce, they can go to the wholesale market, get off their produce within an hour, and go back to the farm. We don't have that in Tobago. The retail market is in shambles again. We don't have a proper retail market. We do have other marketing agencies that provide that support to the farmers. The marketing department is supposed to facilitate that marketing system has not been functioning properly. So the whole marketing system for agricultural produce, if you go back 30 years ago, is a poor system. So I'm glad that the Chief Secretary would have established this agricultural revitalization team. I'm part of that team. And one of the things that we are doing right now is, or what has been recommended, is to work with NAMDEFCO. In fact, the team leader already spoke to NAMDEFCO to come to Tobago and evaluate, look at our marketing system for agriculture, and try to develop a proper marketing system for our farmers. So that is already in train. Okay? We have the pests. We spoke about the human pests, but we have the animal pests and the bird pests. And these have been devastating our agricultural crops. We have the iguana, they like green things, right? So they'll eat your pasture and your lettuce. We have the agouti, eating the root crops. Then we have the national pests. We call the national bird, the coquelicot. So sometimes a guy might plant potato, and the coquelicot would eat the leaves, eat the potato leaves, and when they cannot eat all the leaves and the rest of the potato get a maturity stage and bear, the agouti will finish it off. So it's a total devastation, you know, of the potato crop, and that is a serious problem. The coquelicot, the agouti, the iguana. We also have the parrot and the parakeet affecting the fruit trees, right? So when farmers are faced with these problems and your whole crop is being affected to this extent by these pests, obviously they're going to get off the land. They'll find other things to do because if when you plant your crop you cannot earn a living from it, you can find other avenues to get into. Access roads. From time to time, again, the society would have made representations to the division with respect to access road, but as we all know, funding is sometimes a problem. We understand, but sometimes these access roads are not maintained. They will cut the roads and they're not properly maintained. So even if the roads are there, farmers sometimes cannot access the road because they're not properly maintained. Right? There are farmers who have lands and they want to get into full-time production, but there's no access road. So these are some of the major challenges that would affect farmers. I should also mention that at the division, they provide a support service to the farmers in terms of tractor pool, the tractor pool service at a subsidized rate. However, farmers over the years have been complaining about the level of service they get from the tractor pool service. You have a farmer who wants to put down a crop, And sometimes he has to wait 3 to 6 months to get tractor pull service. And then you look around and you see our next person's land plowed, and in 6 months he hasn't planted anything. So something is wrong there, you know? So why the serious farmer who has his land to plow, can I get it plowed? And a less serious farmer who not really too keen on agriculture, his land is plowed, and he's not planting anything. So these are some of the things that would have affected the farmer's ability to really increase production in Tobago. But I can say that things may be looking a little bright. I'm not too sure, but we perceive that things may be looking up because the present Chief Secretary, he has advocated that agriculture and tourism are his main planks in terms of development. And he has developed the ART, and the ART is looking seriously at putting things in place to deal with some of these challenges. The society is working collectively with the ART and the other agencies. We are part of the ATA as well. So the society is an active stakeholder in terms of agricultural development in Tobago. And we're going to continue to pledge our support in whatever area, because we want to see the food import bill come down. We want to see agricultural production increase in Tobago. And we're working towards this end.
I think I'm a farmer myself, incidentally. So give thanks that you don't have macaws in Tobago, because they just love putigal. And my neighbor could testify to how destructive they are with their body weight on a putigal tree branch. Okay, we would now invite you to make closing statements, starting with lost your name now. Group on the left.
Thank you. I know that the agro-processors didn't get a chance to say much, but in our closing remarks, we have some things that we also want to advocate for. I think one of the most important things to the whole sustenance and foundation of the agricultural industry in Tobago is the existence of a lab. We do not have a functioning lab here that can do all of the tests that are required for the certifications that Mr. De Freitas was alluding to. We cannot get none of these certifications without a functioning lab. In order for our producers to be able to sell anything in Trinidad, we need a free sales certificate, which requires us to get our products tested, and we have to get our products from here in the state that it has to be sold at in the supermarket, and get it to Trinidad in that said state that it's going to be sold at in the supermarket to be tested. Sometimes it doesn't make it in that state, especially if the boat takes 5 hours to get to Trinidad. So we need a lab here that can do the testings, not only for processors, but also for farmers, also to test things like water quality and those sort of things that are needed for GAP certification and also HACCP certification. My closing remark would be that the Tobago Agro-Processors Association believes that there needs to be an agricultural policy with strategic direction specifically designed for Tobago. We were disheartened to know that the Revitalization Committee was established and agro-processing was not taken into consideration, which we believe that is a vital downstream commodity and process that can take place, and that adds to the agricultural product. It also adds to the tourism product, which is also one of their economic drivers, but we weren't taken into consideration. We also believe that a value chain strategy needs to be crafted and implemented. A pilot should be conducted to establish a farm-to-plate mechanism, which can then be duplicated after best practice is established. This will eliminate the lack of information between the farmers and end users and create more opportunities for all along the chain. More aggressive training together with access to lands and hands-on technical support will assist with all of the current challenges. Training within the school systems, both primary, secondary, and tertiary levels, will diminish future challenges that we are facing here in Tobago. We also believe that agro-processing will enhance the quality of and the demand for agricultural products. Agro-processing companies in Tobago, though we are micro, have the potential to provide employment not only in processing, but also in farm and off-farm activities, such as the handling, the packaging, the distribution, and also the marketing of the foods locally, regionally, and internationally. There are clear indications that agro-processing and agro-processing industries have a significant global impact on economic development in communities. Within the Tobago context, there needs to be, we need to recognize that agriculture, together with food processing industries, are forces for economic development, especially as tourism is a preferred economic driver for Tobago. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you once again for inviting us. And yes, we believe the private sector, not just the Hotel Association or us here, we believe that we can grow a private sector, a sustainable long-term future for a private sector in Tobago to take that dependency away from the THA for employment. In our view, it is not sustainable to have that employment level where it is. We will need to look at systems to put in place because we will need financing. We need better rates of interest, better terms of financing to rebuild from a very embryotic state. But we can do it. Mr. Khan, there is an enormous benefit, a marketing benefit to tourism if the things come from Tobago. It's a real plus. It's a plus for the country. If we can, I say it time and time again, if Trinidadians come on holiday here, the money stays in the country. Therefore, if we can promote that and create that patriotism of people coming to Tobago to spend their money rather than going Barbados, one of the things the ferry service, the lack of a ferry service did and the problems on the air bridge, when I phoned the other associations, they all saw an increase in Trinidad visitors. St. Lucia, Barbados, Grenada, they all saw a tremendous increase in Trinidad visitors. That cannot be good for an economy that's losing foreign exchange. So the more we can make this an attractive destination for tourism, the more we can support all of these other industries that supply our industry. And if we can promote, we've actually got a name, Farm Fresh Tobago Best. We are going to promote Tobago as being a natural destination, a quality destination, and those add-in things, agro-processing, agriculture generally, are going to help us do that. So we really want that support and mechanisms in place in Tobago to build this private sector that we so much want. Thank you.
If I'm just to add steal a little of Mr. James's thunder, we now have to look at the path we have to take to making a private sector in Tobago be a robust one. It is not sufficient to expect if you put money in the pie or if you put some of the facilitation role that the government would take, that business people will naturally gravitate towards it. There has to be a deliberate guiding in that direction because we have come through a history of a particular type of operation. So it's not just going to happen by gravitation. It has to actually be deliberately guided in that direction. And so there needs to be a transitionary period that takes us from being a private sector that seems to be overly dependent on the state for support to a private sector that is robust and resilient to drive the thing. There has to be a transitionary period where the state will play a part in strengthening the private sector to a point where it becomes weaned and stand on its own. And if we can adopt that, then we can actually chart a deliberate course for seeing agriculture, fisheries, the beekeeping society actually flourish within a 5 to 10 year period. It has to be a deliberate choice, not by talking, but also the resources and the policy necessary to drive the whole process.
And the Tobago Agricultural Society?
I just want to allow my fellow members to just say a couple of things, and then I would give the closing remarks. Mr. Archer.
Thank you. I want to create a term, reversifying. And I'm talking specifically about cocoa and coconut. Much talk has happened about looking at getting back to the production of cocoa and coconut. With regards coconut, 90% of it was done on the western end of Tobago, rather flat end. And that end is now attracting the population of Tobago for living purposes and for tourism. So that whereas I thought it ludicrous as a child to buy a coconut, I am now buying coconut from Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, I have coconut in this being bought from Trinidad and Tobago, from Trinidad. And with regards cocoa, much of the cocoa estates are now owned by the THA. For the cocoa industry to be revitalized, there has to be a deliberate effort, as my friend in tourism said, a deliberate effort to revitalize, to reversify from where we were many years ago back to cocoa and coconut. We all here would admit that we have a tremendous product in the cocoa that is grown in Trinidad and Tobago. And if we could go back to having a quality cocoa that we could even process here to the end product rather than sending it to Sweden or wherever in Europe, sent back to us in chocolate, that we could do the linkage here and have that middle man produce the quality product that we all would like to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Archer. In
To
closing,
express our appreciation for your time and your efforts and your submissions. The Tobago Hotel and Tourism Association, the Tobago Agricultural Society, and the Tobago Agro Processors. And I want to extend an invitation to you, given the submissions of the other parties. I know there wasn't much room for, how should I put it, cross-fertilization, but I find it interesting, some of the things which have come up. So I wanted to draw your attention to the issues about the more vertical approach given the land question, and whether or not, given the labor question, whether the answers lie with regard to what we have spoken about all over the country, but hasn't happened anywhere really, the utilization of CPEP and URP as a form of a labor subsidy. And to me, the other issue surrounding the labor question in agriculture is whether a migrant solution is possible. Because the labor question in Trinidad is being resolved in the security industry. We all know who. In the pump attendant and in the gas station industry, we all know by whom, right? I think it's the 2 Gs, right? Ghanaians, or how is it pronounced that? Ghanaians and Guyanese, good? And that is quietly happening, whatever is the national policy of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Those 2 groups are emerging and resolving our labor question, and in the security industry as well. So the question is migrant labor a possible solution in Tobago, or is it CPEP and URP, or is it, as some people seem to suggesting when they are quoting the statistics about the employment figures coming out of the THA, because that to me comes like the oil industry, how it pulled away people from agriculture at the turn of the last century. is it that the THA is pulling people away from agriculture? Is that what you're saying when you're citing that statistic about 73% of the people employed are employed by the THA? Is that what is being implied? So I would like to get further submissions from the organizations out of Tobago focusing on these issues. I thank you, and we now suspend this session.
You're viewing the Parliament Channel 11, also broadcasting on 105.5 FM.
The introduction of the universal adult suffrage for the first time in Trinidad and Tobago was for the